Gotcha. All right. It's 9 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Jerry, the roll, we're going to show that Sonny and Sandy are not here today. Is that correct? Everyone else is. For the audience members, if you need a agenda, you can get it on the back roll on the bookshelf. You'll be able to pick it up and follow along. Has everyone been able to review the minutes from February 11th, 2019? If so, I'd entertain a motion to approve unless there's any corrections.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Approval of today's agenda. I'd entertain a motion for approval for today's agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. PJ Conover.
Hey, good morning. PJ Conover, Director of Planning Department. Next item is consent agenda. The following items have been placed on the consent agenda for action to be taken on all items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration. The findings of the Planning Commission are recommendations to the Pennington County Board of Commissioners. Item 3, Conditional Use Permit 0009 for Performance Development Group to review a 300-foot stealth monopole communication tower and equipment shed in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of Conditional Use Permit 00-09 with 7 conditions. Item 4, Conditional Use Permit Review 9842 for Prairie Acres LLC to review a mobile home park in a suburban residential district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of Conditional Use Permit 9842 with 16 conditions. Item 5, Conditional Use Permit Review 1620 for Perry and Vicky Van Newkirk to review a pole barn constructed prior to a residential structure on the subject property in a low-density residential district. Staff recommends to end Conditional Use Permit 1620 as it is no longer needed. Item 6, Conditional Use Permit Review 1625 for Alvin and Sharon Gullickson to review a vacation home rental on the subject property in a low-density residential district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of Conditional Use Permit 1625 with 15 conditions. Item 7, Conditional Use Permit Review 1631 for Black Hills Raptor Center to review a bird education and health facility on the subject property in the General Agriculture District. Staff recommends approval of the extension of Conditional Use Permit 1631 with 13 conditions. Item 8, Conditional Use Permit Review 1638 for Tom and Terry Haggerty to review a townhome on the subject property in a suburban residential district. Staff recommends to end Conditional Use Permit 1638 with the applicant's concurrence, as the use for the conditional use permit was granted has not been established in accordance with Section 510E1B of the Pennington County zoning ordinance. Item 9, Conditional Use Permit Review 1722 for Pamela Phillips to review a single-wide mobile home to be used as a permanent single-family residence on the subject property in a suburban residential district. Staff recommends to continue the review of Conditional Use Permit 1722 to the March 25th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. Item 10, Conditional Use Permit Review 1740 for Richard Burton to review a caretaker's residence on a subject property in a low-density residential district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of Conditional Use Permit 1740 with 6 conditions. Item 11, Conditional Use Permit 1748 for Alvin and Sharon Gullickson to review a vacation home rental on the subject property in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of Conditional Use Permit 1748 with 14 conditions. Item 12, Conditional Use Permit Review 1750 for Benjamin Schilling to review a gunsmithing business on the subject property in a limited agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of Conditional Use Permit 1750 with 12 conditions. Item 13, Conditional Use Permit Review 1826 for Kelly and Brenda Hansen to review a recreational vehicle to be used for no more than 180 calendar days on the subject property, and to also review the recreational vehicle to be used as temporary living quarters while building a single-family residence on the subject property in a limited agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of Conditional Use Permit 1826 with 14 conditions. Item 14, Conditional Use Permit 1901 for NMMC Incorporated, Terry Saylor is the owner, to allow a vacation home rental on the subject property in a low-density residential district. Staff recommends to continue Conditional Use Permit 1901 to the July 22nd, 2019 Planning Commission meeting to allow the applicant time to address outstanding issues with 1 condition. Item 15, construction permit 1902 for Site Work Specialists Incorporated to construct a gravelled access road to and onto the subject property to include a minimal tree removal, grading, gravel, seeding, and culverts. Staff recommends approval of construction permit 1902 with 14 conditions.
Are there any items that staff would like to pull off the consent item?
Item 14 for minor correction.
Okay. Any items from staff? I mean, from the membership? No items to be removed? Members of the audience, are there any members in the audience like any of these consent agenda items removed from the consent agenda so they can be heard and considered separately? If not, there will be one vote for all the items that are on the consent agenda. That leaves us with, for the consent agenda, item 3 through 13 and 15 for our consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the
I'll move to approve consent items 3 through 13 and item 15.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number 14.
Item 14 is conditional use permit 1901, which is to allow a vacation home rental on the subject property in a low-density residential district. The minor correction is to the page 7 of 7. It is recommended with one condition, but that condition was numbered number 2 on the staff report, so the request is just change that to number 1. So the recommendation would be staff recommends to continue conditional use permit 1901 to the July 22nd, 2019 Planning Commission meeting to allow the applicant time to address outstanding issues with one condition.
Any discussion on this item? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve with the changes.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number 15.
16, I think you mean.
16, you are correct.
Item 16 is major plan unit development amendment review 1704 to review an existing plan unit development in accordance with section 213 of the Pennington County zoning ordinance. This was continued by the Planning Commission. Last time it was heard as a request from Commissioner Johnson about a couple of the conditions that were in the staff report. Some of the questions were revolved around the condition that had the new lots, the proposed lots, join the HOA, and then also the restriction on the well lots. So this PUD originally started in 2006, and there's a number of water issues and septic issues out in this subdivision. And the HOA was concerned with what this developer was going to do with the lots across the street. The HOA also oversees the water system, the community water system in the area, and the developer was going to drill their own wells and connect to that water system. So per the Pennington County zoning ordinance, with one of the criteria for PUDs is for the Planning Commission and the board to ascertain that sewer and water is adequately provided. Those two conditions were added and have maintained as a condition in the PUD. Does that answer?
Go ahead.
So just go back just a little bit. So where is the authority that we can address water and sewer in these conditions?
Sure, I'll show you here. It's in the Pennington County zoning ordinance, page 73.
Okay, I just didn't quite.
That's
I
okay,
wasn't-
sure.
My ears weren't open when you were speaking. So Pennington County zoning ordinance,
Yep, it's page 73, section 213, C4.
C4,
Yep.
okay.
And I
okay.
can read it if you'd like.
No, you don't need to. I'll go back and take a look. But, so then, does that mean that we can, I guess I was under the impression that it wasn't our jurisdiction to address water and sewer when we were making these considerations, but that's not quite right, that we really can address those?
This is in a PUD.
Yeah, in a PUD.
Yep.
We can address them in a PUD, but we really aren't, we can't address them outside of, unless the zoning is PUD?
Well, sewer, we definitely do.
Yes, through
Yeah.
the wastewater,
And then
right?
water has come up quite often from the board, especially last few years, not so much this year as a concern. It is something that we'd look at in the future with a zoning ordinance change.
I
But
see. Okay,
anything
All right.
additional?
thank you.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. To clarify, it's not the fact that just the fact that it's a PUD. When you're looking at authority from a legal standpoint, the question really is, does the condition imposed somehow relate to a requirement for approval? In the case of a PUD, under the ordinances cited by Mr. Conover, one of the conditions, the requirements for purposes of approval specifically state that there must be adequate provisions for sewer and water systems as approved by the Pennington County Planning Department. So the conditions that were imposed are directly related to a condition, requirement for approval for a PUD. You can't have a PUD approved unless there's adequate water supply. So these conditions directly related
To that,
to
okay.
the requirement
I see.
for an adequate water supply.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any further questions for PJ?
With that, for item 16, staff would recommend approval of the extension of Major Plan Unit Development Amendment 1704 with 21 conditions.
Any questions for staff? Any members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item? Seeing none, current recommendation is approval, extension of major planned unit development, PU 1704 with the following 21 conditions. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll
For
move approval.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll second then.
Okay,
Motion and second.
Moving.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. That takes us to item number 17.
Item 17 is construction permit 1810 to grade in order to flatten an area to receive 4-inch gravel for a new parking lot. As you can see in the staff report, staff was recommending denial. Staff actually met with the agent and the 2 landowners. We also had State's Attorney's Office from Pennington County present. Commissioner Lassiter was there for a little while. City of Rapids City Planning staff, City of Rapids City Public Works, 3 representatives from the County Highway Department, plus planning staff. So it was a packed conference room, basically going over with the applicant some of the concerns that we had, and again, requesting the drainage plan. Say we met probably for about an hour or so, and at the end of the meeting, the landowners had said that that's what they need to do, and that's what they're going to do to move forward. And so to get, to have the agent, Mr. Ron Davis, to give him time to produce that information, they requested a continuation. And there should be a memo in front of you that, with an email sent from Mr. Davis on February 22nd, that they request that this construction permit 1810 be continued to a date no later than June 24th, 2019.
Any questions for staff?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Rich.
So PJ, did they say when they wanted this continued to, or do they want it continued to the June 24th date?
No later than. So they believe they can have it done earlier than that, but they weren't sure exactly where it would fall. So this gives them the opportunity to do it at any one of the planning commission meetings prior to that date,
But where do we put it back on the agenda then?
when they're ready, yes. Originally, they wanted
so-
to do it, just continue it until they had the information, but we wanted to put a date on it, so.
Okay, so we can continue this today, just saying that it can be here or we'll hear it no later than June 24th. And then when they're ready, you'll just put it on the agenda.
Yes, sir.
All right, I understand. I thought we had to pick a date. Sorry.
Fair enough. Any other questions?
yeah, I have
Go
one.
ahead.
So the drainage study that they're going to do and complete, is it the drainage study for the entire racetrack drainage basin, or is it more of a, kind of a smaller study that's just really, what affects, what role the racetrack itself plays in the overall drainage?
Well, the discussion at the meeting was for the whole property, because it also includes this construction permit, which is the city side of the property.
The whole property meaning just their property,
Correct.
not the entire basin?
Well, whatever he would need, well, that is part of the property, that drainage basin, the racetrack.
I know, but
The
I'm
stuff
talking
outside of
about
the-
the larger basin that
Oh,
goes.
north of it?
Yeah, the entire drainage basin,
We did not request that.
that,
No.
okay.
If Ron looks at that, that's going to be on him.
Uh-huh.
Any further questions for staff? Any members of the audience want to speak on behalf of this item? If not, recommendation is to continue CP 1810 to a date no later than 24th of June 2019. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Takes us to item number 18.
Good morning, Cassie Bolstead, Assistant Planning Director. Item 18 is subdivision regulations variance request 1815. This is a request to waive plating requirements to create lots 1 through 8 of the Keystone Y subdivision. This was continued from the January 14th Planning Commission meeting, so just to give you guys a little bit of a reminder, they are looking to split these 4 existing mining claims into 8 lots. It would be lots 1 through 8 of the Keystone Y subdivision. They are proposing a 40-foot wide access easement to provide access to all 4 of the lots, including a turnaround on lot 4 and on lot, I believe it's lot 6. So last time this was before you, you guys were told that it was, the layout plat for these 8 lots was approved on June 19th, 2018 by the Board of Commissioners. The preliminary plat was approved on November 20th, 2018 by the Board of Commissioners. So right now they are in the process of trying to meet the conditions from the preliminary plat so that they can actually file their final plat. And this subdivision regulations request, if it is approved, it does satisfy condition number 5 of their preliminary plat. So they're requesting 6 subdivision regulation waivers. They are requesting to allow the use of a 40-foot wide easement in lieu of a 66-foot wide right-of-way. They're requesting to allow the maximum grade of a road to be 15% for approximately 900 feet. To allow an exception to not install guardrail on slopes with a slope greater than 4:1. To allow the angle between road intersections to be less than 75 degrees and allow a tangent between intersections to be less than 100 feet. To allow vertical curves to be less than 100 feet, and to not perform percolation tests and provide soil profile hole information before platting. So a couple of updates that I do have for you guys from the last meeting. On February 4th, staff did receive additional documents from the agent, Spurlick Consulting. They are in the audience today if you guys have questions. Those documents included exhibits of the existing access road and the proposed access road, depiction of the distance to the helicopter, referencing Keystone Adventures, exhibits and photo of Calumet Road to be used as a comparison to the proposed road, and then updated road improvement plans. All those documents should be included in your guys' packets today. And then on February 5th, the Board of Commissioners did approve the applicants for road naming requests. That was also a condition of the plat. If for some reason this plat does not go through, that has really no bearing. That's why the road namings were allowed to go forward. And then on February 18th, staff did receive an email from a neighboring property owner with regard to the applicant's requests. A copy of that email is included with your staff report. And in addition, staff did also include information relating to the Jacob CUP denial for the request for the heliport next to low-density residential as indicated in that email. So staff did change the recommendation a little bit from last time this was before you. Staff is recommending approval of a portion of subdivision regulations variance 1815 to waive 5 of the plating requirements, which would be to allow the use of a 40-foot wide easement in lieu of a 66-foot wide right-of-way, to allow the maximum grade of the road to be 15% for approximately 900 feet, to allow the angle between road intersections to be less than 75 degrees, and to allow a tangent between intersections to be less than 100 feet, to allow vertical curves to be less than 100 feet, and to not perform percolation tests and provide soil profile hole information before platting. But staff is also recommending denial of the portion of subdivision regulations variance 1815 to waive the exception to not install guardrails on slopes with a slope greater than 4:1.
Any questions for staff?
I do.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, so I do have a couple of questions. I guess first of all, for the record, I want to just be clear that right shortly, a few days after our last meeting, I actually arranged with Shane Schreiner to visit the property. And so he and his engineers from Spurlick showed me around. So just want that to be clear. And then also last Friday, I took a call from Andrew Busby and to discuss the issue. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, you know, the email from Andrew regarding his request to include this issue, Jacob CUP from some years ago, I didn't see that in the electronic packet. So I haven't reviewed that. Was that there, Jerry?
Yeah, it's.
In the electronic? Somehow I didn't see that. I was looking for that.
The one online?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, well then it's my fault. I just didn't see that, so I haven't really looked at that. So I may need a little explanation on what that's about. Um, okay,
There's an email right in front of.
yes, uh-huh. Right, the email was there on the online version, but then it immediately went to the next item. And I didn't see it, but maybe, my error, I'm sorry. I just didn't see it, but
Any further questions
all I have.
for staff? Okay. Any members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item?
All right, thank you. Yeah, my name's Cale Magnum. I own Swirlick Consulting, 821 Columbus Street. I have to thank Ms. Johnson for meeting us on the site, and we did travel around and looked a little bit at the existing road that traverses through the site. I know there was some confusion initially about what the site looked like, and so what I did was I prepared a number of exhibits that'll kind of lead you through what we have now. This is the existing access road. I've gone ahead and color coded this. The green is, 0 to 12%, yellow is 12 to 15, and red is where it gets overly steep. And the existing road right now, as you enter through the Forest Service, it's got a lot of topography to it, slopes that are too steep for use for residential purposes. To mitigate that, what we've done is we went through and did a plan for improving the site. It's further down on the first one? Okay, sorry for that. So this again is the existing access road. You can see a lot of reds in there. That's where the roads are overly steep. Mitigate that problem, what we're proposing is this configuration. You see that the entrance road through the Forest Service will go from some parts that were over 12%. We'll grade them down to meet this 10 to 12% criteria. See that there are some yellows, but these all fall within the current county's criteria for slope. Green, again, is where it gets nice and gentle to the end. So while there was an exception, a variance request for this property, it's not for any of these yellow slopes. They're all completely in conformance with the current ordinance. It's for this piece right here, because this slope is allowed, you're allowed 500 feet at that slope. What we're asking for is an additional 400 feet. And when you think about the difference between 12 and 5%, obviously it's 3%. You do that over 400 feet, it's 12 feet of additional grade at the end. If you did that over 900 feet, it's 27 feet of elevation difference. So that being said, if you're hooked at this intersection and you had to raise the end of this 27 feet, this end of this bulb would be sitting on a mountain of fill and you wouldn't be able to get off the end of it. So that's the purpose of the variance request, is for this piece of road so we can do this last 400 feet also at 12%. Now, with regards to, we discussed some of the things that the staff are in support of. With most of the exceptions are in support of. The one that they're not is the guardrail issue. And I would like to point out that when we looked at the configuration here, for instance, at this road, it is a driveway. It's a driveway to access a lot over here. This road coming down, once again, it's a driveway. And these are not public roads, they're private roads, but we're making every effort or endeavoring to build them to the county standard. But the reality of it is they're a driveway that accesses this lot. And this is a driveway that accesses this lot. So even this road, I mean, there's there's a house site here. So realistically, there's two people that are gonna be going past this point. It's the people that are gonna own a house here and the people that are gonna own a house there. So what we're realistically looking at are driveways. But like I say, every effort's been made to try to design them to meet the county ordinance. And that's the reason we're looking for, an exception with regard to the guardrail. We did look at trying to flatten out the slopes, but when you start looking at meeting the county criteria of a 4-to-1 slope, it's not possible because you can't catch without going onto the Forest Service property. Even a 2-to-1 slope, you'd have to clear cut most of the trees out here to be able to make that slope catch. So that's kind of some of the logic that got us to where we're at. So I guess I would ask for some support and grant of the variances. And if you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to show you. I know that there has been some concerns with regards to proximity to the helipad. If you look at the radius, this is the closest lot. It's 765 feet from the subject property. The next closest lot would be over 1,000 feet. And I'd be happy to take any questions you have and/or provide hopefully any more clarification that you need.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Why should we consider not having installed guardrails? I mean, that's a safety factor, this road the way it is. Why should we, as the planning commission, consider waiving that requirement?
Okay. Yeah, so the road the way it is, of course, is going to go away. That road bed will be abandoned in lieu of a configuration that's much less steep. So when you look at these types of configurations, and we're asking for a variance not to install a guardrail the entire length, what you look at is these are long linear roads. So when you have steep curves, that's where your opportunity to slide off of the roads are. When you're talking about long linear roads, the potential for sliding off the road into a corner is much less. And we see this all throughout the hills. I mean, I'm sure you've driven out in the hills, everybody's done that, where you're looking over the edge and those are county roads and it's a 40-foot fall to the bottom. In this case, what you get is a lot of trees and more linear roads.
So you're talking about just on the straight roads. How about the corners, the curves?
So I think there's some room for negotiation, and we could look at distances like, for instance, this curve here, and maybe something here. In this case, this road's in cuts, so it's uphill on both sides. So there's no potential for falling off the road. You'd hit the bank on this side, and you'd hit the bank on this side, which really is no different than hitting a guardrail. There's one spot here that I guess has an opportunity to look at that one where you would be traversing down, trying to negotiate this corner.
What about all the way down at the end of that road with that variance? Right.
This one, right down here?
Mm-hmm. Well, right in that area, yep.
So this is 5%. I mean, this is the turnaround at the end. So this road's at 5%. It's not steep.
Correct, but that area that you marked out there, is that 900 feet?
Yeah, this is the 900 feet starting right there to right there.
What about the end right there?
At this corner?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some opportunity to look at that. Once again, I guess I would bear in mind that we're talking about a driveway and it's not a public, the public at large is not going to be traversing it. It's the driveway to that gentleman's house. So then or that person's house, whoever that may be, then the question becomes, do we enforce guardrail on all driveways? I mean, I don't know what the good answer for that one is in the county.
Any further questions?
I want to
Go ahead, Jim.
The driveway thing seems to, unfortunately, appears to me to be sort of an excuse to not worry about the safety of this road. I mean, it's one person, right? and they're foolish enough to buy the lot at the end of the line and on a treacherous road or what to other people might appear to be a treacherous road, do we have any obligation to protect that consumer? Now, I mean, that's what I'm a little concerned about. I know it's one person, and people are allowed to make their own foolish choices. But I think we also have an obligation to commit some sense of safety to our discussion, because it isn't going to be just one person down there. You know that. They're going to have visitors, et cetera, et cetera. And so other people are going to be impacted in some fashion. So I guess that's what concerns me, is what is our obligation to the consumer who's going to buy this lot, or is there any? Maybe we have none. I mean, I think some people would argue we have none. But I'm just curious about where you would draw the line.
So it seems to me that, like, this is a good example here. The outside of this curve, it's all running uphill at this point. There's no way to fall off of that slope.
Right.
You know, clearly there could be a discussion about the interior curve of it, but there's everything on the uphill side, there's no way to run off it because there's no way to go. The linear runs don't seem to be problematic to me. I mean, I guess if I was, for the basis of the conversation, if we're going to talk about areas where we could look at it, it would be on interior corners where there's a cut slope.
Right. Okay. So you'd be willing to look at some of these
Yeah, I think we certainly.
potentially problematic situations on this road.
Anything
Okay.
further?
No, that's.
Rich, do you
Mr.
have
Chair.
anything? Go ahead.
I think that there is opportunity to review some strategic locations for guardrail. Not all of the linear stretches, the linear stretches that are at grade that likely have trees and topography on both sides, as well as the uphill cut slopes. You're just going to run into the cut slope. That's not a big deal. In my mind, the opportunities here are the downstream outside corners where you're at the downstream end of, or at the beginning of steep slopes with high fill locations. What are the fill slopes are what, 1.5 to 1?
Yeah, they're about 1.5 to 1.
Yeah, I think you go over that slope, you're riding it to the ground. You're riding it to the bottom of that slope. So I think does every slope that's greater than 4 to 1 need guardrail? My opinion would be no. It's strictly my opinion. But I think that there's opportunities in here to protect some of the corners that have locations that are, adjacent to high slope areas or steeper road grades.
Any further questions? Thank you very much. Any other members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item?
Good morning, Planning Commission, Commissioner Chair. Andrew Busby, I own the adjacent property across the street. And just kind of talking on to what Spurlet Consulting was talking about in regards to their map, just some issues that come to mind. Obviously, we only have one ingress, one egress for fire. I think we just saw that here nationally in California, where we had communities got caught in the middle of a wildfire, couldn't get people out because it was just, trying to move too many people through a narrow road corridor. That property sits on top of the valley, which is, I fought the fire from Battle Creek in 2002. That came up and jumped Highway 16 in the back of a National Guard helicopter. And I'll tell you, sitting at the top of the valley, that's where your greatest exposure is. We've done everything we can to prevent that on our property with a lot of tree thinning and clear cutting. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here today just to oppose the rezoning into from general ag, I believe, to low density residential. And our issues with it are it's incompatible with adjacent zoning, contradicts Pennington County's comprehensive plan, the current one and the future one, and it's inconsistent with prior Pennington County Planning and Zoning Commission's rulings with that heliport on Silver Mountain Road, CUP 1110. Just to go over a little bit about the zoning and the history of the zoning. So this was all once National Forest property. And in the late 80s or early 90s, the National Forest no longer sought the interest in this land, sold it off, and this was zoned highway service and commercial, and then the general ag from inception in private hands. We currently operate right here on this parcel. This is the heliport. We have the easement with the hotel, and then we own these adjacent properties here. And then we have the Breen property, which is a commercial property across the street. And so when we say incompatibility with current zoning, we look at the comprehensive plan, and it kind of spells out what low-density residential is compatible with, and then also spells out what commercial and highway service zoned properties are compatible with. And you can see we have the general commercial and the highway service compatible with each other. And so what we basically have is on the two opposite ends of the spectrum, not the complete opposite. We do have high-density residential and industrial on the furthest ends of the spectrum, but the next closest to those would be low-density residential and the highway service. With that, you know, I think we accept the fact that we didn't buy the property and it was zoned general ag, so that means one dwelling unit per 10 acres, it was my understanding. And if we went to the low-density residential, there wouldn't be anybody, nobody would have to go back and rezone or ask for a variance to put 2 dwelling units per acre on each one of those parcels. And that's what the difference is between low-density residential and the general ag. And so we're really talking about the possibility of having 3 or 4 neighbors right there, or people coming in buying that low-density residential property and putting 2 dwelling units per acre, and they're talking about splitting those parcels up into 3 parcels. Each parcel, each plat would get split 3 times. There's currently 4 plats.
Andrew?
Sorry. So there's currently 4 plats, and I think they each get divided in half, possibly. So, and then if you look at that with low density residential zoning, 2 dwelling units, you know, for say people wanted to come in and build vacation rental properties, like we're talking about more than just one house. Going back to our current comprehensive plan, I know it's a hard map to read, and I pointed that out in the new map going forward, but it is our future land use map. And you can see it has the commercial corridor right here going into Keystone, and that property sits right here adjacent to that commercial corridor. And I know the map's hard to read, but it kind of spells it out further in print about our commercial corridor going from Keystone to Rapid City, and what the comprehensive plan laid out is for as far as guidelines for planning and attractions for that corridor. Following up with the conditional use permit from 2011, granted the proximity was a little bit tighter. I think it was 700 feet. And this is what the document said from the heliport. But what we have here is a very similar situation where we have, instead of it was originally the low density residential subdivision in here, and here, keep in mind this is Sun Country Estates, and they adamantly opposed the heliport, and you can see that distance is greater than 1,000 feet. And we also had the Silver Mountain Road subdivision right here, and so basically we have an identical situation except for the heliport's in existence currently, and they're trying to rezone to the low-density residential. And the rulings on that, recommendation from staff at that time was denial of the permit due to the close proximity of the residents of the area and the possible negative effects of the property values and the noise. And the county commissioners voted 3-2 in favor of that. And so strictly from our standpoint, our issues with the rezone is, again, the incompatibility with adjacent zoning, the deviation from the comprehensive plan, and prior rulings by the county commissioners here in 2011 with a very similar set of circumstances.
Any questions for Andrew?
Mr. Chair, just so I'm clear, this is the next item on the agenda, correct? Is the rezone, not the subdivision variances? Okay.
That's correct. Seeing no questions for you, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair.
Any further members of the audience want to speak on behalf of this particular item? PJ, I have a question for you, or actually, who presented this one? I don't remember.
Cassie?
Cassie. I was like, wait a minute, my default was PJ, but then I was like, wait a minute. So I have a question, and Rich and I both have the same concern. I don't know if anybody else does, probably so, but last time whenever we heard this, one of my concerns was the guardrails, and obviously Rich and I have talked a little bit about it today. The applicant mentioned about, maybe there's area to negotiate or whatnot. How would we have to reword it to kind of fit? If we did a variance so that it's not on all the straightaways, but at least on the areas where there's what'd you call it, Rich? Whenever there's the ledge, is it
High
down
fill slope on an outside curve type of thing.
Right. Is there a way we can reword this to ensure that there's guardrails in those areas for safety purposes?
Well, because the one what they're requesting is to not install guardrails on slopes with a slope greater than 4 to 1. I'm just trying to think.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jim.
would it be appropriate for the owner to come back with a plan? He mentioned something about he would be willing to look at some of these problematic sites. And I was wondering if we ought to continue this so that he could look and see what he could do to make it a safer circumstance for everyone.
Where
And then,
guardrails would be
yeah,
installed.
where he would, now, if he's not generous, and then we can argue with him then. But then it would put the responsibility on him, and we could be able to make a judgment one way or another. I would be inclined to support a motion to that effect, that the applicant come back with a plan for improving the safety elements of that particular these stretches of road. Yeah.
So basically continuing the recommendation of
Yeah.
number 2 rather than denying it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Kathy.
I would be very careful of what we're doing here, because what we're really doing is we're starting down the slope of doing a safety analysis on everybody's driveway out there. And I can just tell you that, our driveway probably wouldn't pass. I can just think of countless driveways that I traverse to go to visit people and this and that wouldn't pass. And this is just really an exception to a practice that's been going on forever, that driveways don't get this level of scrutiny for safety. And I'm not even sure that some of the county roads would pass on some of these that are even more used. I'm thinking of one right now where there's more traffic in and out than I'm not even sure Calumet Road would pass these, because there's some. I've driven down Calumet Road when it was a lot of ice, and I'm not sure that would pass this kind of scrutiny. So I just think we have to be really careful, and we have to be really justified as to why we are picking this one out and making these exceptions. And I must say that being up there and driving around and walking around and looking around, this isn't a scary area. These are a lot more gentle areas than some out there in the Black Hills. So I would really urge caution on this.
Cassie, can you point out the actual named roads versus what's considered driveway? Is that possible?
Yes,
Or
they
what would
named,
be your named roads?
they named 4 roads. Now, bear with me, I don't remember what each one is.
I'm not worried about their specific names. I want to know which ones on this map are actually roads versus where the driveway is.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
They actually named all 4 of them. Some of them are courts. But this one that goes all the way through, like this has one road name. The one that goes up over here has another. This one down here has another, and then this little shoot off has another. That's where the 4 are.
But, excuse, may I?
Go ahead.
But isn't the naming really for 911 purposes more than anything else? I mean, I doubt that a mailman is going to go down to the end of all of these driveways to deliver the mail.
Right. No, I get that. I'm just wondering, once it gets onto the private property, as you can see where that first, as it goes up and it turns to the right and it gets on that piece of property up there, at that point in time, I get the road's name so that the mailman knows where to go, or 911 knows where to go. But at that point is then, once it's on that private property, is it in an easement as a driveway for said property?
The easement, that whole thing that goes through there is just dedicated as an access easement. It's not dedicated as, a private driveway or anything like that. It's just dedicated as an access easement.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chair,
ahead,
maybe
Rich.
not question so much as a thought, but these 8 lots will all funnel down this main road and come downhill towards Highway 16, and then basically make a double curve corner, 2 horizontal curves back to back after coming down, 11%, 12% for quite a long ways. And if that road is icy, what prevents them from going off of there? And I understand what you're saying as far, if these were just a single driveway coming off the road to a single house, that would be one thing, but these 8 lots will all funnel in and out on this main road. And to Jim's question, what is our obligation? Isn't it for the safety and welfare? Isn't that part of what our charge is on the board? So that's the reason why I'm bringing up the concern. And so on, I don't think that all of the areas that are greater than 4-to-1 need guardrail, but I think that there are areas here that we should strongly be considering it. And I don't know why we wouldn't do that, or at least move forward with staff's recommendations. So I have a hard time saying buyer beware when we knew better.
Any further questions? PJ?
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to remind the Planning Commission of what the purpose statement for Pennington County subdivision regulations are. Section 100.1 purpose. This ordinance is adopted to provide for the orderly, physically, social, economic, and environmental development of Pennington County, to anticipate and thereby lessen governmental expenditure for the coordination of streets within subdivisions and with other existing or planned streets, for adequate open space, and for the distribution of population and traffic, which will tend to create conditions favorable to health, safety, and convenience through the economical and adequate provisions of streets, sanitation, water supply, drainage, and other improvements as land is subdivided. So that answers your question of where our responsibility lies.
Yeah, we have a modest one, at least, it seems.
Any further questions? I saw Mr. Cale walking forward. Do you have something else to add, sir?
Yeah, I just like a little bit of clarification, and Rich had a very good comment here. All this traffic funnels out through the road. If your concern is about, the grade of this road, the traffic stacking up on the highway?
No, it would be coming down, isn't it? A constant grade until you hit those horizontal curves.
I did provide sheet 5.1 in your plan set. You can see that there is approximately 100 to 120 feet of this road, or less than 2%, or they're at 2% grade.
But the curves that I guess that I was thinking about are from station 2 plus 20 to 5 plus 40, roughly thereabouts. And that,
This location through here,
Yeah.
these curves here.
and so they turn the corner up on the top there, then they come down 8.7, and then it switches to 12%
Yeah.
coming through those curves, and
Yeah.
that's a long stretch. I mean, there's neighborhoods in Rapid City, albeit they have more people and more traffic in some of those areas. But the question is should we proceed with the development, and then if we have safety concerns with minor portions of that development, what is our obligation to enforce certain items within the zoning criteria or the ordinances. I think there's opportunities here for improved safety on some of the corners. That's my opinion.
I'm in agreement there.
Sorry, just hearing what PJ said, I'd be remiss not to bring up the environmental impact. Keep in mind for the Planning Commission that we, as a county, have been dealing with a long issue across the street in the same geological formation that this proposed subdivision is going to be in, with a septic and drain field issue. And I know when we were requesting our permit for construction and our conditional use permit for the heliport, it was brought up, and I think we had an engineer on the Planning Commission at that time as well, Lori, and she brought up the concern of the septic drain field situation with that banded iron ore formation right there in that valley, and cited our neighbors immediately to the south of us, the Lodge Hotel, that had the EPA rulings against it. And I just remind the county how much time and money they've spent out there trying to get that situation cleaned up. And so waiving the percolation test waiver may not make the most sense in this situation, because I think that if you don't have a drain field, I don't know if that's a great place for a subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Rich.
And I guess there was something that got brought up about vacation home rentals too. If one or two of these things turns out to be a vacation home rental, now all of a sudden you have public coming from who knows where, coming to a house, and so they're not going to be used to the day in and day out items that might be harder to navigate, maybe would be the way I would phrase it, to be considered of. So again, I think that there's opportunities here for some strategic locations. I think that there is room, from my perspective, in providing some areas of variance to the specific regulation, but not to all of the areas as proposed.
I have to agree with the VHR potential in the area. Actually, that means that it would fit the local area for the tourism as well. I understand what your concern is with the percolation test, but typically in the plating stages, we waive them often. Correct me if I'm wrong, PJ. We waive them often then, because once you start to build, then you have to go get the percolation test. And if it comes back and they have to do something different, then then whoever's building has to do something different. So we waive them often during this phase. Are there any further questions for anyone? Any further comments from the members of the audience? Seeing none, there's two recommendations. The first recommendation is for staff recommends approval of the portion of subdivision regulation variances SV 1815 to waive the following 5 plating requirements. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I guess I have a question for staff. Can we approve half of the recommendation? How does that work?
PJ actually brought up a good point. If you guys do have concern and would like to see maybe a plan or something of where guardrails could be installed, like we've been talking about, PJ did have a good suggestion that we could continue it and ask them to come back with another exhibit showing where guardrails would be installed. That way you guys could choose to waive the plating requirements, but approve an exhibit of some sort showing where guardrails would be installed. So it could be this same thing, this same map, just showing where they would install those guardrails.
Which really would be a continuation of SV 1815.
Yes. Until they come back with that plan that shows where guardrails would be installed.
So one continuation motion would basically move both of these continued instead of just one recommendation, or would we have to do one for each recommendation?
If you continued it, you would continue the whole thing, the whole request.
Yeah, but that,
Go ahead, Kathy.
but that would not affect our discussion on the next item number 19.
No, you could, you could discuss them separately.
Yeah, we could still discuss that. So currently there's a recommendation to approve. Portion of subdivision variances SV 1815 to waive the following 5 plating requirements. Is there a motion?
I would move to continue SV 1815 to allow the applicant to review the guardrail questions that have come up.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any further discussion?
As a matter of clarification, Chair, are we looking to just continue it to the next planning commission meeting?
That would be my motion.
Okay.
Does the seconder agree to that?
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no.
No.
Lloyd, did I hear you say aye? I just want to make sure I heard 4
say
ayes
aye.
because it's critical with the force because we're so low here. Motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to item number 19.
Okay, item number 19 is rezone 1811 and comprehensive plan amendment 1810. This is the request to rezone those 29.02 acres from general agriculture district to low-density residential district and amend the comprehensive plan to change the future land use from plan unit development sensitive to low-density residential district. All 4 of these lots are currently zoned general agriculture district right now, so this rezone request would satisfy, again, one of the conditions of the preliminary plat that they have approved. It would be the condition number 1. Let's see here, surrounding zoning within a mile of this property is general ag, general commercial, highway service, plan unit development, and Keystone city limits. Surrounding future land use within a mile is general commercial, highway service, plan unit development, public lands, PUD sensitive, and Keystone city limits. So staff is seeking guidance from the Planning Commission regarding the rezone request for the following reasons. The applicant's request to rezone is in harmony with the lot sizes that the applicant is proposing to create through the platting process. However, their request is not in harmony with the current surrounding zoning in the area. The nearest property zone low-density residential district is approximately 1.25 miles southwest of the subject property. You can't even see it on this map. And then with regard to the comprehensive plan amendment, the applicant's request to change the comprehensive plan from plan unit development sensitive to low-density residential district does not appear to be in harmony with Pennington County's future land use, so staff does recommend that the future land use zoning remain as plan unit development sensitive. So we are recommending denial of the comprehensive plan amendment. However, that does not impact the rezone request. They can be done differently. You can still rezone the current land use and leave the future land use as PUD sensitive.
Any questions for staff?
I have one.
Go ahead, Jim.
What's the consequence of you deny the comprehensive plan amendment, but not the rezone?
The future land use would just change as or just stay as PUD sensitive, so it would have a different future land use designation than it does a current zoning designation, but that doesn't change the uses that they would be able to do currently on there. It just allows for that PUD sensitive, which we're not even really sure what that means, other than that it could be a good place for a planned unit development, to stay there as the future land use. It really doesn't have any bearing on the current land use.
I guess I'm more confused than I was before I asked the question, quite frankly. But, okay, I guess I will, that always begs for a negative response, I guess, but, well, I guess maybe in some ways I'm trying to suggest what's the impact of the new comprehensive plan? I mean, it does, I mean,
Well,
should we be concerned about stepping away from the comprehensive plan?
well, we're basing our recommendations for comprehensive plan amendments right now on our current comprehensive plan, not our future comprehensive plan, because the one that Matrix has done is not in effect yet. It hasn't been adopted. So the only one we have to work off of is our current comprehensive plan for these types of requests. So it would just remain like it is as PUD sensitive unless the future comprehensive plan changes it.
PUD sensitive?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Any further questions for staff? any members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item? Andrew?
Thank you again for your time. I promise this is my last time up here for a while. I'd just like to ask the question, and what is the purpose of the comprehensive plan? And if we're going to ask for amendment to the comprehensive plan, why are we spending money to develop a second comprehensive plan? And it's just a rhetorical question, and I'm not quite sure I have any answers, and I'm pretty new to all of this, but I did do the research and looked at the old comprehensive plan before we bought our property, and I've looked at the new comprehensive plan, and so that's just a rhetorical question I asked the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Any other members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item? Any further questions? I have a question, Cassie. So it meets the size requirements for rezone, but not the surrounding other zoning, correct?
Correct.
So this question's a little choppy, but this is what's been spinning in my head since I reviewed this. It's, obviously when someone owns a piece of property, I think they should be able to do what they want with that piece of property, but there always are some limits to that depending on what's going on, things of that nature. Obviously, one of my big concerns is because there's an established business and corridor that's already growing up over there, how it could impact a current, the helipad. Because it's real close. Maybe my question should be, what is suitable to be rezoned in that particular area? I mean, if you don't have any of the surrounding that's current, limited ag? Because it's general ag, is that correct? Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, yep.
So the next down step would be limited ag, or you go to something like industrial.
Right. This is a tough area right here in terms of rezoning because really the only things that are in that immediate vicinity, as you can see in this map, is highway service, general commercial. There is a very tiny PUD right here. But everything else, there is a little bit of limited ag right there. You can see it in the very far corner down there.
Right.
But Keystone City Limits is right down here. And I don't remember zoning to the north so much. But that is the difficult thing with trying to rezone in this area is it is predominantly general commercial. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, is there are also a lot of Forest Service lands out there, which Forest Service lands show up as zoned general agriculture. They don't show up as current zoning of public lands or anything like that. So there is a lot of Forest Service out there, which kind of throws the map off a little bit, but they also do have the option with the plat to request a lot size variance to keep these lots general ag without rezoning. But they would have to get approval of one or the other for the plat to move forward.
Go ahead, Ken.
But the current setting, the current situation, general ag zoning, the lots kind of derived from the old mining claims, they're right now, regardless of the zoning, despite the fact they're zoned general ag, the current situation allows for one residence to be built on each one of those lots, right?
Right.
Right. So they could, even though they don't fit the current size for general ag, because they are legal non-conforming, or is that the correct term? Yes. So they're still eligible for a house per lot.
If they were to stay like this, yes.
If they were to stay, right, yeah, exactly. So without any change of anything, there could be 4 residences.
Right.
Yes, okay.
Any other questions?
I have
Go
a
ahead, Jim.
question. Yeah, I haven't been out there for quite a while. And I'm just curious about what's, the zoning I can see there, but the terrain, how practical it is it for anything to be there in the way of commercial development? Highway service. Is there enough flat ground? Because the helicopter people are up on a mountaintop, and this appears to be on a mountaintop. I'm just kind of curious, is there any practical areas where one might expect there to be meaningful commercial development?
Well, this kind of gives you a little bit, this is the Forest Service road going in. And then this is where you start going into the proposed lots. Now, granted, this is the current road that exists. This isn't the proposed road that they're wanting to do. This is that current road, but you can see there's quite a bit of topography out there. Now, whether or not you'd be able to find a flat spot for any sort of commercial ventures or anything like that, I don't know. I didn't, when I took these pictures, it was last summer, and I didn't get out and walk around, meander through the woods to kind of see if there was any flat spots. I just stayed on the road. And like I said, this is the road that exists now, not the road that they're proposing.
Well, I'm just thinking that highway service would seem to be the most sensible thing. And it'd have to be close to the highway. And you're not going to somebody's not going to build a service station up where these people are proposing these lots. I mean, I sometimes wonder if there's any utility for the current zoning, I guess is what I'm saying. And maybe I'm way off the mark here, but as I say, my ignorance is large here because I haven't been out there for a number of years.
But I think that brings back the point is that there isn't a need for rezoning. If they're content with 4 building sites, then there's no need for rezoning.
Yeah,
True.
that may be true, yeah.
Well, it is true, because I just asked the question. and-
No, right,
yeah,
I agree with
it
you,
is
true, unless they have a different plan.
Well, that's right. If you want 8 structures, then a rezone is required. But for 4, it isn't.
Right.
Just one comment on the highway service. The lots that would be highway service have to abut a highway
Yeah,
to be even considered.
okay.
Okay, there's that requirement. Any further questions for staff?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Rich.
It seems like we have a scenario here that, and I'm not sure how to get to it, but we have an existing business owner that's very concerned about the future of his business across the highway from where this development's going, based on previous actions in history of the board and other locations in the Black Hills. And we have a developer that now wants to come in and take these 4 mining lots and split them in half and make 8 house lots there. Is there any way to, I don't know how this can even be done, but to acknowledge the concerns of the business owner and the landowner, saying that he knows that there's this business over here that does this and yet wants to move forward anyway, and then protect the business owner on the back end. And where I'm going with this is, I read some language in here and I was looking for it earlier and I couldn't find it, but it talks about protecting ag lands and putting deed restrictions on platting next to farming operations, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any sort of solution here along those lines? Is there anything like that?
I think what you're referring to for the ag stuff is that it cuts down or eliminates all the nuisance complaints on existing ag properties if someone was to move in after that's already there. It's in all 50 states as a state law. It seems like a legal thing. I'm not really sure. I don't have an answer for you in this case.
Okay.
But I would know a decision like that, something like that, could have far-reaching impact if neighbors don't like what another neighbor's doing in the county, because that happens all the time.
Sure.
Yes,
Do you
it
see
does.
where I'm trying to go there? How do we, the developer knows that this business is across the way and is moving forward with what he wants on his own property. And I agree with that, but it's the second and third owners of those properties down the stream that the business owner is obviously concerned about.
But if I may, but I guess the way I see it is that likewise, Mr. Busby knew that there were these 4 mining lots that could conceivably have a structure built on them when he developed his helipad. So that to me is the existing situation where everybody got into it with their eyes open. And where I'm headed is that it's you know, I'm really unfortunate, I can't support this rezoning into 8 lots. I mean, I'm perfectly okay with them being and I guess, and so to me, we shouldn't make this too complicated. These 4 lots exist, people can build on them, the developer can sell the lots. I mean, it's unfortunate from the developer's perspective, because it helps with the cost to have 8 versus 4, but for the reasons that we talked about earlier, I'm not at all convinced that there's adequate water up there. You just don't drill a well in that kind of rock and get water. The septic is always an issue, as we found out across Highway 16 with that hotel and the issues that Mr. Bussy's had. But you know but that's really not our problem, I don't think. I mean, there are regulations and rules in place to ensure that would be water to those houses, whether they have to be hauled in or whatnot. There's ways of doing wastewater treatment systems, even if the rocks aren't compatible, you know, with mound systems and containment and so on. So I really don't even see those as our problem or our issue so much. But I do think that it's just not getting that high density. I mean, 3 acres in some areas isn't high density, but out there it is. And I just don't see that it's compatible with just, you know, the area in general, the geology and the geography and the topography. But then, you know, if you look at the area there, it's that kind of housing development just doesn't fit there. If it were closer to Keystone, if it was sort of an extension of Keystone, we might be able to make the argument, but this really isn't.
Any further?
I think I'm being-
Lloyd, you look like you've got, nope.
No.
Okay, I didn't know if you were getting ready.
No.
Jim, go ahead.
Well, well stated, Kathy, and but, you know, the helicopter thing, and I feel much like Rich does, that I'm sensitive to his interests, but he's operating a nuisance business. And when you get into it, you know that's what it is. I mean, and go back to the original application, the example, which Mr. Bussey included in our packet from Silver Mountain Road several years ago. I was on the commission at that time, and it really, the guy who operated that operation was a great guy. He was probably one of the best business operators I've ever run across, but he flew helicopters, made a hell of a lot of noise. And they were the source of endless irritation and difficulty. So, you know, that's the problem, is if he was running an art shop over there, this wouldn't be an issue. But, so I don't think we can try to protect those kinds of interests because it's not a normal business circumstance. So I think many of the things that we've suggested could indeed unfold over time, as you say. As Rich says, second, third owners get over there and say, we got to stop this helicopter stuff. So this is a difficult situation to have introduce this, I guess, now that there is the helicopter presence. So anyway, just a comment.
I was just gonna make a quick comment. I live right next to the railroad. I didn't realize how often the train came through. Guess what? I'm like, well, I guess I got to deal with it. It was there first. We moved in.
Yeah.
I got to deal with that decision. And if I try to sell, then hopefully the other person has the same thought I did. Oh, this is a great place.
Yeah.
Go ahead, PJ.
Just a reminder, the rezone is for all 29.02 acres. The preliminary plat to create the subdivision has already been approved by the Board of Commissioners through a preliminary plat.
So you just added one more layer to this.
Saying that
Thank
the
you.
Board of Commissioners appeared okay with the subdivision of the lots, but a rezone or lot size variance had to be obtained.
Right,
That was done in November 20th, 2018.
that's right. But I mean,
Go ahead, Ken.
so, I mean, that's one of the conditions, but if that condition's not satisfied, I mean, if we denied this, they could still get a variance in lot size.
Well, this is what Cassie had alluded to in the
Right.
very beginning of the presentation.
Exactly
They can
right.
request it. There's no guarantee
Right,
they're going to.
that's right, exactly
And the
right.
Board of Adjustment requires a higher standard, has to have 4 out of the 5 to say yes.
That's right.
If both are denied, then they're stuck.
Right. But I mean, I also remember many times when we're dealing with these preliminary layout, if I get the words right, the first two levels of the
Layout usually is the
layout
first.
and the preliminary, and then the preliminary plat, we're very mindful of the fact that we're not doing the deal because there's these requirements that have to be met, these conditions that have to be met, like the rezone.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, any further comments? Any other members of the audience like to speak on this item? I think there's one. Do you have, you're gonna fill us in on something?
No, nope.
You're
I'm
just waiting.
trying not to sneeze.
I just want to address Planning Commissioner Coleman's comment. I don't think we're here today necessarily saying this is in order to protect the heliport. I think there's also another argument to be made that we're also trying to protect future homeowners that have to deal with the nuisance of the heliport. And as the commission has probably observed today, I'm very tenacious and I don't plan on going anywhere. You know, we have 2 little girls and we moved. I grew up here and we bought the property and I moved our family from Alaska to be here, and we've invested our life savings to be in that location where we're at. But at the same time, I think the issue, and I presented it last month, every time that I have somebody trying to sell me something, I have never had them try and tell me the reasons I shouldn't buy it. And when they sold that property 2 years ago to the Shriners, they intentionally masked the heliport in the sales flyer. And that's just one prime example. And so I agree that a helicopter is a nuisance, and I agree we can do better in the Black Hills for protecting ground-based users from that nuisance. And that's a conversation I think we can have as in a different time. But moving forward, we're really talking about going from 4 lots to 8 lots and reducing the impact by 50% in that housing development. And I ask myself, is that where I'd want to live? And the answer is yes. But I think you also have to ask yourself, would you want to live in that subdivision next to the heliport? And so the other half of the argument is protecting those future landowners from that noise impact.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
I'd like to take a look at our distance zoning, because we had discussed, well, I have an exhibit on here that shows the distance from the nearest lot to the helipad, and there's been a lot of discussion about this.
Is this yours or is this the planning's presentation?
Because I believe they're looking at 500 feet from the 500-foot barrier for the FAA on this helipad site. So we're having a heck of a discussion about it. But
Say that again?
I'd like to remind everybody that we're talking 765 feet to the nearest lot, and the house site's up here closer to 1,000 feet. I guess I don't know, and I'm not well-versed on helicopters, but I don't know why they have to make this big banking turn over the top of the residentials. It seems like they can just lift up and go.
All depends on wind. There's a lot of things that make a factor in that.
So, yeah, I guess it just seems like if the FAA and or their requirement is the 500 feet and that we're in excess of that, it would seem reasonable that 1,000 feet ought to work. And you can, your ideas about the rezone and
Yeah, I'm Shane Schreiner with Schreiner Investments, so, I guess I kinda got here a little late. I thought it was gonna be later, but, apparently the discussion is to just, I guess, leave it the way it is with the 4 lots, is what I guess I understand you guys are wanting to propose, or?
Well, that's what one individual has stated, and some of us have maybe agreed.
Sure. Well, like I said, with us, we wanna, put it into the 8 parcels. The road distance doesn't get any shorter, if you have 4 versus 8. So, obviously, take the costs of divided by 4 versus 8. And, like I said, I don't know if really the helicopter, discussion is of any relevance at all, really. I know Andrew has issues with it, so those people don't complain and I guess shut him down, but I don't know how that could happen either. maybe it would, I don't know, but I don't think they would have that authority, but, so, I guess, you guys are planning and zoning, we want it like we've proposed it, and I guess, just give it an up or down vote.
Any questions? Nope. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Lloyd.
I think there's been some really good discussion here, and you guys kind of got me going back and forth on this quite a bit. But I do have to admit, with Kathy, with the 4 instead of the 8, and I kind of see their side too, and I think when the perk tests come back, they may find out that they may not be able to do that, and with some of the conditions with that. The property owner, or business owner went through quite a bit of business to get to where he is today from people further away. So I understand his frustration and of what could happen with this. But I guess that's where I'm kind of at right now is want to listen to just a little more discussion between the 4 and the 8 and the rezone. I kind of agree with that maybe we shouldn't do the rezone and maybe they come back with a variance if they want to do 8.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
I guess the other thing too is, I rely on Cale more for this stuff than me, but from what I understand is, I guess you don't necessarily need a variance to go above 3 acres, right? To subdivide into 3 acre, cause is that the minimum requirement? So we're not asking for a variance to subdivide these, they're all 3 acre lots. And so, I don't know where the variance would come into size of the lot, I guess, so. We're just wanting to, do what the guidelines are per the county, so.
Okay. So you want to hear some more thoughts and discussion here?
That's where I'm at.
I'm kind of on the center, so.
Yeah, and if I
Go ahead,
may,
Kathy.
yeah, I fully understand, how the costs work and that having, more opportunity to sell, opportunity to sell 8 lots works out better, pencils out a lot better in terms of the expenses than 4. And so, I'm, so with some regret, I have come down to the position that this just isn't suitable for that dense of housing. But I do think that having 4 structures up there, could be done in a nice way. And and even though I understand Mr. Bussy's concern about the helicopter business and the fear that people will be there and then all of a sudden they'll move in knowing full well that it's there, but then they'll start complaining and who's ever up here at that time will listen intently and try to make some accommodation. I mean, we know how this goes, and so I understand that. But that's not even that's not even the basis of my position, really. It's just simply that this area with topography and the rock type and all of this, I just have a hard time thinking that this is suitable for this type of that dense of residential.
Any other comments, questions, thoughts, or even a motion?
I'll make a motion
No.
to deny the recommendation of for the rezoning and the comprehensive plan amendment. So I guess it's RZ 1811 and CA 1810. Recommend denial.
There's a motion by Kathy to deny.
Second for discussion.
Motion and seconded. Further discussion.
What's the motion again?
To deny
To deny
The
both the
rezone.
rezone and
Okay.
the rezone and the amendment of the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
You have something to add to that?
No,
You just wanted the second for the discussion aspects of it.
wanted to see if anybody else had anything else.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Rich.
I will not be supporting the denial of the rezone. After hearing everything, I'm a property rights guy as well, and I think that if they want to do that, what they're doing, and they can make it work and they can make it work safely, then I would be okay with that. 4 versus 8, I don't see the big difference there, and so I'm in support of the rezone. At this point, so I will not be in favor of the denial.
Jim, any comments?
Well, I think 4 is better than 8. I honestly do.
I'm of the mindset that, again, I've said it before, property rights, if you want to do it, I think something can work there. You know, we're obviously talking about safety in that area as well. If it goes from 4 to 8, whether it's 4, whether it's 8, either way. You know, it could be one of those areas that they develop it and maybe it does become a great VHR area. Again, that's one of the reasons why I kept in the back of my mind the safety aspect of it, because if it does turn into a VHR, it's right down there in the middle of tourism area. It'd be a great place to potentially have vacation home rentals, but I want those people to be safe if they're going to end up turning it into that. We don't know. It hasn't been told to us that that's what the end result is, but it could be, and it would fit with the plan. I'm not inclined to deny it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
got a question for PJ. PJ, the current motion on the floor is to deny the rezone and deny the comprehensive plan amendment. What other options are there to be able to divide from 4 to 8? What other paths could he take?
They could do, they could do the lot size variance request and go that way through the Board of Adjustment.
Through the Board of Adjustment. So it's not like it's a flat denial, but he'd have to come through the Board of Adjustments for a variance.
He would. Also, this recommendation still goes to a first hearing before the board, and the board can either uphold this or change it. Or the Planning Commission could even look to deny without prejudice, which gives them an opportunity to come back again. The Planning Commission is making a recommendation to the board on this rezone.
And it only passes if we have 4 in favor of it. And since we have a limited board up here too, that may factor into it.
And in those cases, we usually would like the motions to be in the affirmative, because then you know that if it doesn't pass, it's a no. There has been some confusion if the motion is to the negative and it doesn't pass, then what happens? There has been some confusion of that in the past, at the board level as well as Planning Commission level.
Do you have any further questions?
Well, with the information, it kind of seems like even this board's split.
Yes.
You know, if you're looking for a 4, you need 4 votes on this one too?
Today, yes.
Today. So I think it's split this way too. So it might be more
Send it
appropriate
to vote and send it to the Board of Commissioners with a.
I got in trouble last time I sent one with no recommendation. But I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if we're split.
Right. Well, the reason why it takes, we're short to commission,
Yeah.
planning today. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, so I guess the suggestion from PJ was that the motion take the form of an affirmative, and that's not what we're doing right now, is that right? So how would we change this around to achieve that?
Well, the motion maker could withdraw it or amend it, change it, right? Is that the proper term? Yeah.
So
There's
the motion
also
is,
an opportunity for the Planning Commission to continue this item until there's more planning commissioners present. It's another option.
the motion's to denial.
That is correct.
Right. And so how would you reword that into the affirmative?
Motion to approve.
Oh, I got what you're saying. Okay.
And then you know one way or the other whether the vote passes or not. There's just been confusion on the denials.
Okay, So what I should do then is withdraw my motion.
Yes, and I believe the seconder has to agree to that.
Michelle
sure.
Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office, to clarify, the reason it's better to have a motion in the affirmative is this. If you bring a motion to deny and that motion fails, all we know is that the motion to deny has failed, yet there's been no affirmative action taken. Someone could simply also do a substitute motion since it's been seconded, and the substitute motion would have to be considered first. And I have a concern too, depending on the split of the board, you could have a motion approve, fail, a motion to deny, fail, because you need 4 votes. So that's one question here too, is whether you do want to continue to where you have a larger body to weigh in on this issue.
And that might give us at least 2 more insights for this particular sensitive issue.
Their previous item was continued.
Yes,
It was.
the roads.
I mean, if it's for us, we've already postponed this. And I would just as soon, just give it up or down vote and we'll move on from there.
Well, we've continued your other items, so that might coincide if they came together in 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I guess, what did you continue?
The previous item, right? That was,
Subdivision regulations.
subdivision.
Rezones usually are a minimum of 3 meetings. So the subregs could be done even before the rezone is finished.
gotcha. Okay, thank you. All right, well, there is currently a motion to deny, and it was seconded. Oh, you withdrew it, okay.
I'm
Okay,
okay with that.
yeah.
And you're okay with that? All right, so then where do we stand? Is there a new motion? Are we going to?
I'll make a motion to approve rezone RZ 18-11.
Motion to approve by Rich,
Second.
second by Lloyd. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No,
No.
I actually was going to say aye as in the middle of saying it, and it didn't come across there, so I apologize. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 ayes. Is that correct? Did I hear that right? And then Kathy was the no. We'll do a roll call just to verify. Rich?
Aye.
Hold on here just a minute.
Actually, I shouldn't take your job there, Jerry. That's your call.
That's okay. Rich,
Aye.
Jim,
No.
Travis,
Aye.
Kathy,
no.
and Lloyd.
Aye.
Motion fails. So that goes to the Board of Commissioners with that.
It does. And then there's also the action needed for the comprehensive plan.
Staff recommends denial of the comprehensive plan amendment CA 1810. Is there a motion for that?
So move.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any further discussion?
If I
Go
may.
ahead, Kathy.
So then, now,
I know
aren't
what you're going to ask.
we in the similar thing now? This isn't set up to be a vote of the affirmative, it's vote.
Because this is a denial.
That part, that part I don't know. I was just coming up here to clarify on the comprehensive plan amendment. I did have a discussion with Paul from Spurlick about my recommendation on the comprehensive plan amendment. So he understands why we're recommending denial of the comprehensive plan amendment. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that that's not something new.
Okay,
Gotcha.
so nobody,
Yeah, they didn't. There you go, Michelle.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office, to answer Ms. Johnson's question. She's absolutely correct. If there's a motion to deny and you have 4 votes, then we're done. You've denied it. But the problem is, if it's 3-2, that motion fails, but yet there's
I
been no
see.
affirmative action. So that's kind of why Robert's Rules of Order going to recommend an affirmative vote, and I know that's counterintuitive because perhaps you're opposed to that particular action, but it just makes it cleaner in terms of have you in fact taken affirmative action?
But do you recommend then, how would you recommend doing this rather than approving the denial? How would you recommend?
Because the staff has recommended denial. Well, the bottom line is if you want to make a motion to deny and it ends up 3-2, you just need to know that then there needs to be, you're stuck in limbo. The fact that the motion has failed, you're stuck in limbo, so that it needs to understand that then you'll need to bring an alternative motion to prove to
A
see if that
secondary motion.
passes. So you could bring a motion to deny and see if you carry 4 votes.
Yeah, I see, okay.
Okay. So do you still stand by your motion?
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that the comprehensive plan amendment does nothing with regards to the, if we leave it as future land use, sensitive, then it doesn't, or the planned unit development sensitive, it doesn't really change the rezoning part of this, correct?
Correct.
So I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, withdrawing your motion. Jim, you seconded that one, so you're
And
okay with that?
And I will make a new motion to approve the comprehensive plan amendment, CA 18-10.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no?
No.
No. Motion carries with the no. It's denied.
Everybody voted no?
Everybody voted no. There was no yeses.
The motion failed. The motion was to approve, correct?
Correct.
The motion
And
failed.
so the motion fails, so no amendment.
No amendment. All right. Item number 20.
The commission just want to power through or take a break, doesn't matter to me either way.
Does anybody need to square away a vehicle, parking 2 hours, or anything of that nature? All right. Can we take a 5-minute recess? We need a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to take a 5-minute recess.
I'll second that motion. All in favor, say aye. 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 All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, Rich, you're going to make a motion to reconvene.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We are on item number 20.
Item 20 is ordinance amendment 1901 from Pennington County to consider the amendment and adoption of the comprehensive plan. So the item in front of you is the comprehensive plan draft from July 2018, prepared by Matrix Design Group for Pennington County. Before we go into it, I don't know if the Planning Commission would like to have a discussion of how we're going to go through the 11 chapters. The Planning Commission has set aside this meeting and 2 supplemental meetings to go through this. I don't know if you guys wanted to discuss how you want to do it before we try to dive into it.
Does anybody have any specific recommendations? I'm not sure where we all sit with the comprehensive plan, how much we've been able to review and how many notes we have on it, or if there's just specific areas we'd like to touch base on. But I'm open to suggestions on how we want to crunch through it, and we talked a little bit about it last meeting. Maybe hitting certain chapters, and if we have questions, hash them out, and if not, then move forward.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
is there an updated list? Was that in the packet?
Last one you guys received was the most recent.
So the 2 weeks ago, this one is the most recent.
Correct.
Okay.
Rick's been out of the country on assignment and then also on vacation after that. So the updates we were looking for weren't able to get done along with the other stuff that he just
So there are some.
do.
So there are some more inputs, they just haven't gotten to us yet.
He was going to update from the last meeting and then also make some changes to the online map and provide us with PDFs that break the county into smaller quadrants even smaller than the sections, so that when you zoom into them, you have a better idea of the detail and what is the proposed zoning from Matrix.
Did he do that?
No, that's one of the things he wasn't able to get to.
Oh, he was not able to get to. So I'm open to suggestions on how to move through this, whether we just take highlighted areas that, we move through chapter, for example, let's just say 2. And if we don't have any questions, concerns, input, changes, then we move to chapter 3. I mean, it seems like that's,
Well, let's do it that way until we discover that's not the way to do it.
all right. Well, then there we go.
Okay, so the document begins, of course, with the title page, goes through acknowledgements, which has been updated with the current Board of Commissioners and the current Planning Commission. Goes into public input, then through table of contents. Are there any comments on the table of contents?
I don't have any.
And that's that's the beginning of the document. The next item would be chapter 1, which is the introduction and the purpose of the comprehensive plan. The main thing with this is that what staff is looking to do, aside from Matrix going in great detail about how we tried to solicit public support with the 15 planned public meetings, and then also having the online option mentioned multiple times at Planning Commission meetings and Board of Commissioners meetings, the little business cards that we put out, which probably are still on the seats because a lot of people don't take those. Multiple times it's been advertised in the newspaper to solicit comment, in addition to what Matrix has done. And Matrix is even presented before the Planning Commission and the board, set up a table in the outside in the lobby, tried to get some input during a Board of Commissioners meeting. So that's what the recommendations from Matrix are based on. One of the biggest differences that you'll notice is what's on the screen today is a breaking of the county into 3 distinct areas. And what the purpose of this is when we go through with the zoning ordinance, which is going to be kind of the directions of how to get to this comprehensive plan, is going to, though it treats the county as a whole, it adds a little bit less or more restriction, depending on where you go, in different zoning areas. So you have the Black Hills on the west outlined in blue. You also have central Pennington County, which outlines the city of Rapid City and follows pretty much the Metropolitan Planning Organization's delineation for basically the city's future land use outside of their city limits. And then also eastern Pennington County. What staff's goal is, and this is directly from a recommendation from, kind of like the seed was put in from Matrix, staff discussed it, and we believe that after the comprehensive plan is done, no matter how it looks, if these 3 areas are still intact, what our goal is with the zoning ordinance is to create a zoning ordinance that is general for the entire county, but then also, depending on which section you're in, there is heightened or lessened criteria. So the greatest criteria for building permits or for anything that we do would be that central Pennington County area right outside of the city of Rapid City and with Box Elder and Ellsworth Air Force Base, because I believe my opinion is the county has a responsibility to help those entities as they grow. That's the purpose of the platting jurisdiction, the septic jurisdiction. Then if you were to go west to the Black Hills, not as much restriction as if you were in central Pennington County area, but kind of a step down. Now, do we know exactly what that's going to look like right now? No, but it is a goal of ours. But because of the topography, because of its nature, because most of it is actually public land, we do believe that it still has a level of scrutiny that is required. Then the eastern Pennington County side, where a lot of that area is agriculture, that would be kind of the less restriction on that side. Again, we don't know how these are going to look, but that is our goal. That's where we want to move towards. That's kind of the big thing in chapter 2. Any comments? And then getting into chapter 3, this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. This is that's chapter 2. Sorry, let me change here.
Mr. Chair, PJ?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I was, so will we go through like the existing comments and say, is everyone good with section 1.4? Everyone good with section 1.5? And then move forward, or do you want to take it chapter by chapter?
I'm okay with going through the questions pointed out.
So there have been different ways, this has been done different ways. A lot of times, and most experience is with committees when they're doing ordinance amendments. Depending on how many different sections or parts there are. I'll take the vacation home rental committee ordinance. When they went through a section, they made a motion on that section. Then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And then when all was said and done, they made it one overall. Votes changed at that time because some people didn't like what was inside. But they felt that it was fair that each one was looked at individually, an opinion was given on each one individually, and then also on the whole. It's just an option.
So each chapter then, is that what you're saying? Or you say chapter or section?
You could, chapters,
Okay.
you could.
So we are to rely on the response then from Matrix on here on what they think needs to be made, or if the change that, they will make a change based on the comments that have been submitted? Because we won't be rewriting this during this process. They will be rewriting this, right?
Correct, they'll be watching the they know where the link is to the video. So besides our notes that we send them, plus they'll watch the video and they'll make adjustments.
Okay. I guess my opinion would be to go through it and say, everyone good with section 1.4, everyone good with section 1.5, and we, push our way through this document.
I'm okay with that. I'm good. So then, section 1.1.
Actually, I do have something on that section.
Go ahead.
And maybe maybe 1.1 isn't exactly where this needs to be, but I think that, to me, the kind of the guts of this is these goals and policies that are in all of these succeeding chapters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be helpful somewhere in the introductory material to explain how those goals and policies fit. And it struck me that it might be in this section, but it may not be the best. I don't know, because it has three defining features. It has this general guidance. It has, some comprehensive and some long range, which are kind of general, but more specifically, to me, the defining feature that's not addressed here are all these goals and policies that are listed out, very carefully and with action items and so on. And so I just think that it's fine to have the general, comprehensive, and long range, but then take it one step further and explain how these goals and policies fit in there.
Okay.
A lot of that verbiage, I think, is in section 1.6, but that may not be exactly what you had in mind either.
Well, not really, because here it just lists the chapters and so on, and it says it contains a series of goals and policies which are labeled using acronyms and so on, but it doesn't really say how those goals and policies will be utilized in this general, comprehensive, and long-range planning.
Okay.
It just simply, and I appreciate it, it just simply explains that they're there. But I guess I'm looking for something a little bit more to help me understand how they will be utilized in this planning. And, that kind of brings me back to, the reason I was fussing about this is when I was reading those goals and policies, sometimes it says shall, sometimes it says should, sometimes it says, encourage, I just would like a little better understanding of the how we're supposed to read that, interpret it, and use it.
So instead of having it in chapter 11, well, maybe keep it in 11, but then also just mention it a little bit earlier.
Well, maybe I haven't gotten to 11 and chapter 11.
Chapter 11, yeah, it's implementation.
Oh, yes, I see. Well, and this is fine, keeping it at 11, but, to me, that, it still doesn't explain, just some understanding of how that works. But, I think, implementation is kind of prescription. This is, short and long, and that's fine. But
Okay.
I guess I'm looking for something a little bit more to help us understand.
Okay.
Any other input on section 1.1? And you'd like to see something on that one before we do any kind of vote on that
Oh,
section?
not necessarily. I mean, I guess it's going to be on the list now that I brought it up, I believe. Is that right, PJ? It'll get on
Yes.
this list and,
Yes, that's his intent.
yeah. I mean, if it comes back and they say, no, we don't need anything there, I think then I might want to reassess, but I certainly trust Matrix to, hopefully get the gist of what I'm after and address it appropriately.
But coming from a viewpoint of somebody who doesn't write these for a living, your viewpoint might be the general public's consensus as well. So
Yeah,
you don't have to agree with Matrix.
Yeah, so, but I mean, I'm not opposed to approving it in concept and moving on.
Gotcha. Okay. So any other comments on section 1.1? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve it as it is.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion?
So they'll incorporate the change that
That's what
Kathy
we
wants,
talked
right?
about.
All right.
Taking it down and incorporate it. Currently as is, noting that there is an expected change that we'll see in the final document.
All right, then I'm okay with that.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 1.2, section 1.2. Is there any input, comments, or changes? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve. I didn't have anything in 1.2.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay. There's quite a few of these little sections. Can we maybe do one batch of them, all of chapter 1 maybe? We can maybe talk about each section and then do all of chapter 1. That might make us go through a little bit
I
faster.
don't have any comments on the others, so it's fine with me.
I mean, we'll go through section 1.3, 1.4, and just see if there's anything to add.
You could do it like a consent calendar, where you only take out the things you want to consider separately. If there is something in the chapter that somebody wants to discuss.
Yeah, good idea.
I don't have anything in chapter 1, so I'd make the motion to approve sections 1.3 through 1.6.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. That's chapter 1. Chapter 2.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Kathy.
So on 2.2, I made the comment already in my written comments about under future land uses. We're on the Black Hills focus area now. And right now it reads, this area will primarily have a focus on low-density residential to ensure natural. I think that needs to be changed to rural residential or even less dense zoning. And I made a comment to that, and it's on the sheet here. And Matrix says requested change will be made, or to be made. So I think I'm okay with how that will be handled.
Okay.
Which paragraph is that in? I'm sorry.
Future land use under the Black Hills focus area.
Yep, okay, so down
It
here.
says focus on low-density residential to establish the natural character. Well, low-density residential, the way it's designed right now is,
About half acre or less.
yeah, about a half an
20,000
acre.
acres,
So my recommendation would be to, at a minimum, we should focus on, it doesn't mean there won't be any low residential, but to me, the focus shouldn't be there. It should be on rural residential, which now is those 3 acres, or even some of the less dense.
Yeah, you said agricultural, ranchette residential, and rural residential, right?
Yes, right.
I agree with that.
So you'd like it to read, this area will primarily have a focus on
Well, the way,
rural residential
look at
to
look
ensure.
under, on comment 9 on the sheet here. That was my written comment.
So just replace low density with rural residential.
Yeah, rural resident, or agricultural ranchette residential, rural residential, I'd strike low density and replace it with rural residential, ranchette, rural residential, and ag.
Because that's what the goal is, to keep them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal is to keep the natural, what does it say, natural look or natural something.
And that's the zoning, not lot size.
Well, but
I mean, there are instances where you could have something zoned.
yes,
Okay,
of course, but
okay, just wanted to make sure. I think
Yeah.
I got your intent there.
Anything else in section 2, the planning the framework from 2.1 all the way to 2.10? Should say page
think-
210.
And I think the most important thing in 2.2, besides talking about the three different areas of the county, is public input is what drove all this. So we presented ideas, they either didn't like them and threw them out, didn't talk about them, or they caught on to them and helped develop them. And that's why splitting the county into three is still in there. And then also, it's their missions, the vision statement that they created, kind of the guiding idea for the comprehensive plan, is on the first page of the chapter. And that was completely developed by the public.
Any further comments on that? Any further input? If not, I'd entertain a motion for pages 2.1 through 2.10.
I'll move approval with the change suggested by item number 9 in the written comments.
And then it looks like, I'll second that, sorry.
Okay, any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
it looks like there's other items. It looks like Mr. Busby on item 11 and county planning had some with regards to some lines that were cutting through some stuff. And all of those changes would be incorporated as well. And that takes us through all the way up to comment number 12, right?
Yeah, actually, could I can I amend my motion to include all the comments that apply to number 2 that are listed on this comment sheet?
I'm okay with that.
I'll
Is there a
second
seconder?
Yeah.
Chapter 2, you mean?
Yeah, all these comments, which would be, looks like comments 8 through 12, yeah.
All those being adapted or,
Yeah, incorporated,
incorporated.
the responses.
any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Keep this pace up, we're out of here in 10 minutes.
All right, section number 3, which is
Yes.
page 3.1 all the way to, I believe 3.15 is the last one.
So in this chapter, obviously you see the new zoning districts that we are recommending. There was some concern that had come up over the years that staff had been documenting that there wasn't really anything between our 3-acre minimum low-density residential and our 10-acre limited agriculture. And that there was an opportunity for some different zoning in there. So that's kind of what you have before you with the ranchette residential and the rural residential to kind of fill that gap, especially with the ranchette residential, where they're recommending a minimum lot size of 5 acres. And the other thing is, again, the meat and potatoes of each zoning district and what are permitted uses and what are conditional uses comes about through the zoning ordinance, not through the comprehensive plan. And the other thing also with the ag, because staff was a little confused of why they combined all the ag together. But after they explained it, it makes a lot of sense, is that, again, this is a very general document. So they're just saying anything pretty much over 10 acres, given certain conditions, should be ag. Now, it's up to us and Planning Commission and the board to decide from 10 acres up, what are we going to call those? Are we going to keep the 10-acre, 40-acre type of examples that we have had, keep those uses? That's for us to decide later, but they're just saying right now that anything over that, or 10 acres or up, should be ag. Could be ag, I shouldn't say should be.
And this does not include, obviously, which we were just talking, or which you just stated, this is just general uses, anything that deals with CUPs and the zoning and everything, that's all gonna come through the zoning ordinance. It won't list any of that out in here.
Correct. And the uses that are in here aren't necessarily by right in that zoning district unless the planning commission and the board decide that they are.
Correct. Okay. That ranchette will definitely help out some areas, that's for sure.
Help out a lot of areas.
I think that'll help out a lot of areas, so when people go by, they're like, oh, okay.
Yep.
Any input, questions, comments?
I have one more, sir, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Yep. On page 3-5 of chapter 3, there's plan unit development. In going to conferences and talking with Matrix and talking with other planning professionals, PUDs are becoming frowned upon because they're being abused throughout the country, and, well, we're very flexible with them in the county as well. We're looking to honor existing PUDs when and if this gets approved, but also take it out as a current land use moving forward. Where the appropriate thing to do would be for them to apply for conditional use permits or variances because those options exist. Right now, because PUDs are available, it is kind of another way around to getting what people want.
Okay. Go ahead.
PJ, my understanding, there have been, way back, or I mean, some years back, a couple of PUDs at least that was established to try to remedy legacy problems or legacy situations. I'm thinking of like, some of the, like, what do you call them? Like, where there's a kind of accumulation of summer homes around, and PUDs were very handy in trying to remedy all of these issues that have developed historically and so on. Is there any reason to keep the PUD as a viable alternative just for use in those kind of situations where it just could be the cleanest, most, easy way to kind of remedy situations?
We could probably rewrite the ordinance for PUDs in that rezone, because again, a PUD is a rezone, it's not
Yes,
necessarily, but it's a rezone with uses that are made up by
Right.
presented by the landowner and have ultimately approved, and they're all different. None of them are the same. They kind of
Right.
all follow the same. They're a nightmare for us because everyone is different. I think if we made maybe the requirements to be a PUD, or the criteria for a PUD a little bit more stringent through the zoning ordinance, it could be done. But again, through conditional use permits and allowing certain uses in certain areas through permitted uses or conditional uses could be the other way to go without
you
doing
think-
a rezone.
You really think that, that essentially, and maybe all those kind of legacy historical situations have been dealt with and there aren't any more out there, but even if there are some, you think that for the most part, they could be dealt with these other routes, conditional use permit and so on, variances, rather than go the PUD route?
I believe they could, and discussing it with other people around the state, that's how they're doing it now.
Okay,
Can I ask a question on
Doesn't mean
that?
we have to.
yeah.
If the goal is to move away from the PUD, and I kind of understand that, all the allowed uses that are currently in that PUD that's listed on page 35, the one thing that stood out to me, unless I missed it somewhere else, all those other allowed uses, except for this one, is found in other sections except for resort development features. What is that and where would that fit? Is that something we could, I mean, we're a tourist, state, so, I mean, resorts are something that, we should at least have something available for someone to,
We do a lot of this through conditional use permits now,
right, but if
or
I'm,
even on commercial properties or highway service. But like, it depends on how you want to define commercial development features also. I'm sorry, resort development features, I'm sorry,
Right.
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, there are some ag properties out there with conditional use permits that have 5 or 6 cabins on them.
right. I don't know
There's
if I'd be,
commercial properties that have the same, it's just depends.
but that would be something that would fit more in the commercial rather than having its own. I guess what I see,
It's allowed in multiple existing zoning districts right now.
okay, right.
With conditional use permits,
Right. No, I get
for the
that.
most part.
Oh, so it's allowed, but they have to have conditional use permit.
Some, not all.
And some, not all.
Yeah.
I guess I'm
Like,
trying
is
to
that
get
a
away
blurry
from.
enough answer for you?
Well, I'm just trying to get away. I mean, I think if somebody's investing the amount of money that they're investing into a resort, that there should be the capability of them to have a zoning or, area that they can go in and they don't have to worry about a CUP for it if, they're operating appropriately. Does that make sense? Because that's a huge investment depending on what the resort might be.
Not that I would be in favor of it, but you could always create a resort zoning.
I'm
Not that
not
I'd be in
necessarily in
favor
favor
of
of
it,
it either, but I'm just saying, is there a better, it was, that
Well, there's-
terminology wasn't used in any of the other sections that I could find, so that was just kind of like,
Yeah, I think the closest is recreation tourism uses,
right.
public and quasi-public uses, yeah, and that's how, yeah. So, but you could put that in other areas if you so choose.
So if the PUD, oh,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, if the PUD went away, then we would be looking at, well, if it was a commercial operation, then they would have to go into commercial, right? Or highway services.
Or any other zoning districts that you would allow it in some way. Again, all existing PUDs would be honored.
What's Matrix's take on this?
Don't do PUDs and do them through conditional use permits and variances.
Would the requirement of the CUP hinder, I guess, some of those developments? I'm with,
It actually would make it easier, and we don't use that word, I shouldn't have used that, but going to a PUD requires a rezone, that's 3 meetings, 3 hearings. If you're doing a conditional use permit, that comes before the planning commission. And then if it's appealed, it goes to the board, it actually takes out 2 hearings.
right, but it's conditional. So if something
Right.
happens, someone can show up 2 years from later and it could be voted on and be taken
So-
away, right?
PUDs are the same way, they get reviewed as well. You had one today, there was an amendment to the PUD 1704 for Ryan Kelly. The other zoning districts don't get reviewed, PUDs do.
Good point.
You're thinking the same line I am, but yeah, I don't see the,
So really, from the developer standpoint, there's risk in PUD, there's risk in CUP.
Correct. Unless you don't want to allow a certain use in a certain district with a conditional use permit. And you just put it in the list of permitted uses, and they might need septic or building permits or something from the state, but not necessarily a conditional use permit.
So I have a chunk of land and it's near some touristy spot, and let's just say I want to put in a campground with cabins or some resort type situation, right? That we have a lot of. Where do I land in these zoning districts if PUD isn't available?
So if you connect to a highway, you would be highway services. And
Okay.
again, these aren't exhaustive lists of permitted uses. And I agree with Travis, that's pretty much the only places it appears, PUD and highway service, and they're not even identical in word choice.
but see, if I was 3 miles away from the highway and I want to still do a resort, well, highway service doesn't really fit in that because we already know that you got to be butted against another highway service and.
Right, but remember, these aren't the guiding documents. The zoning ordinance will decide what is allowed in
Right.
each one.
Right.
Not
So
the-
once this goes through, then the real work is revising all of those.
Yes.
I guess knowing that both PUD and CUP are at risk, if you will, for the developer, I don't see. I'm trying to understand why you would continue forward with PUDs. What's the argument to keep it?
I wouldn't make that argument. Again, we will keep it to honor the current ones, and eventually, over time, they'll fade out. But
It'll be kept as, it won't be a future land use, it'll be an existing land use?
we'll honor it. We have, but that property, if the future land use is PUD, we would keep it. It would only be fair, unless you wanted to rezone it to maybe an ag property or a commercial property. We'd have to look at that individually. But our plan was to honor the existing PUDs as they are.
So we would take it out of this document?
No, because then it would still be in as a future land use unless you wanted to change it. Because a lot of those PUDs have requested also comprehensive plan amendment changes and want to be seen like that. If the planning commission and the board deem that that property should be ag in the next 30 or whatever years, when that PUD fades out, then you would adjust that and not make it a PUD. But there are instances where you may.
Okay.
So on page 3.5, the PUD there, of course, moving forward, if the planning commission and the board of commissioners say they don't want to have PUDs, this page is still going to be there. Do we need to add that there won't be any future PUDs in the wording in this so that anybody who comes in and reads this and goes, oh, we can do PUDs? Is there something else that needs to be added to that to say this is for existing land uses at the time the comprehensive plan came into being, or this new comprehensive plan came into being, but there would be no further applications for PUDs moving forward? I mean, do we need to say something to that?
I think we can touch on it in here on page 3-5, but also in the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
Very sure, because I think that would be a good idea.
So you're making that annotation so that we can
Yes.
have that put in there? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I did say our goal was to do at least 3 chapters, is that correct? When we set this up last week, so if we get ahead, we're doing pretty good.
And then also, I'm sorry,
No,
going
no.
on the page 3-8, right now in our current future land use, we have a designation called public lands. And I think this was brought up from Cassie earlier on another item where a lot of the public lands in the county under our current zoning are also the same color as general ag. But if you really look at it, and I'm trying to find the map for it, that dark green is actually public lands. We have no jurisdiction in there. And as you can see, most of the western Pennington County is that, and then southeast Pennington County. So this has to do with some of the change of color, but this is actually also showing what it's really like out there. Right now, if you looked at our current map, all that dark green would be the same, probably light green as what's in the eastern Pennington County. So this shows a truer picture of what's really out there. So we were looking at basically, it's already national forest, it's already public land, so we were just looking to color it accordingly. And then also with the adoption of PACE law and its acknowledgement through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they created a NAL Native American lands, basically in the top center portion of the western Pennington County to show, just like with Rapid City and other incorporated cities, we don't have jurisdiction inside there.
Where is it?
I'll show you here. I don't know if I can draw on this or not.
Is that,
Right there.
Yeah.
oh, right there.
About 2,100 acres, I think. So we just wanted to show that that was an area that wasn't necessarily public lands and wasn't county jurisdiction. So there may be some agreements with law enforcement and fire, but not for our purposes.
All right, anything further? PJ?
Not yet.
How about comments on this? Are there a few comments on this one? I actually left my binder at home, so I don't have all the comments in front of me.
I have a few comments starting on page 11, or 3-11. But, I don't know if we're there yet.
Does anyone have anything before 3:11 that they want to discuss?
Mr. Chair, I see that item number 16, it says for discussion with PC, so I was going to bring that up for discussion and make sure that it got addressed, but, so I'm reading through it now.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. That was on my notes too, to talk about that.
It says from Mark Rutherford, as stated in the Black Hills Focus Area, issues and opportunities recognized, issues associated with a shortage of and competition for housing. Why then is staff housing not allowed on anything less than 40-acre parcel?
That's not necessarily accurate, but also probably better addressed in the zoning ordinance, not the comp plan.
I was going to say staff housing has been approved as a conditional use, right? in certain areas?
Caretaker's residence, stuff like
Caretaker's
that. Oh, yeah. On 20-acre general commercials, just not that far out of town, yeah. It is possible. I think maybe what he's looking for is not having to go through the conditional use permit process and having it by right.
For a 40-acre property or greater?
For less than.
Oh, for less than.
You know, and I think my hunch would be the gist here is that there's like dormitory kind of housing, you know, for staff at some of the, Black Hills resorts and so on. I mean, maybe dormitory is a little bit not quite right, but where several people kind of bunked together. And I suspect that's what, because he says, it stated in Black Hills focus area, you issue associated with shortage and competition for housing. That's one of the real big problems out there. When you bring people into work in your hotel or resort, is where they're gonna live.
Right.
And like at the KOA campground right south of us, they've got a lot of staff housing there. And that's probably a PUD, is that right?
Like bunkhouses.
Yeah, is that at that KOA campground, is that
It's
the?
just out there. I
wonder if that's
can't
PUD.
remember.
Yeah, but they've got a lot of these bunkhouse kind of things, and so my hunch is that's probably what they're driving at here.
Any solutions for that?
Maybe more of a question, what is the perception of, staff housing? What does that mean? That's question one. And then two, is 40 acre, what's the reason for the minimum 40 acre lot size versus the 10 acres?
Most of the land he owns is less than 40.
Okay.
You know, Rich, I asked that question last time, and I think the answer that I got from the Matrix was that this is anticipated to have, like in true farm ranch country, where you want a house for your your hired man or so it's that kind of a thing, and it's where there's large parcels and they just want a second house for the people that work there. It's not really thought about. My impression after hearing his answer, it's not really talking about, or it's not envisioned that it would be a bunkhouse for lots of people. It would just be another family house.
So what door would we be opening then if we allow it to go to minimum lot size of 10 acres for staff housing versus 40 acres? What's the
I
implications?
think it really needs to be addressed in the zoning, because even our highway service and general commercial allow for caretaker's residence now.
So should we just leave staff housing as an allowed use in ag and delete the minimum 40 acre lot size and take care of that in the zoning?
I think it's dangerous to put an acreage on it.
Yeah, I kind of agree I think that's a good point, Rich, that just delete that.
So delete minimum 40 acre lot size in the parentheses. And we'll let the zoning ordinance take care of that.
I
So
think
are
that's a good
you
idea.
on the comment matrix, or are you in the?
I'm on sheet 3-3, but really it's to address item 16 as far as the public comment goes.
Okay, so 3-3.
Under ag, bottom bullet.
Well, there's a lot on 3, but that's the only one on 3-3 page.
Are the rest of them like already in
Well,
there?
most of these.
So staff housing, minimum 40 acre lot size. Is that what
Yeah,
you're
so
talking
I would leave staff housing, but then we would say minimum 40 acre lot size, remove that. And then you're saying take that out and then take care, we could make that note in the zoning ordinance itself. Is that what you,
Isn't that different than his comments, though? I mean, if his comments are wanting staff housing on things less than 40 acres regardless of zoning. I'm not reading that right. And for the ag property, I think in here, for the comprehensive plan, it's saying that staff housing is allowed on a ag property if it's 40 acres or more. What a good criteria would be in a zoning ordinance, and what we look at, is if it's zoned ag and taxed ag. And some places even do it if it's taxed ag it has to be at least a number of years first before you can get that housing. Because somebody can get taxed ag for a year, get a second residence on that property, and cease all ag uses, and now they have 2 residents on the property. So that can be handled through the But I think that possibly what Mark is looking for on number 16 and in the comprehensive plan might be two different things.
But I do think that Rich's idea of just on page 3-3, under ag, under staff housing, delete minimum 40-acre lot size, does satisfy the request made by Mark in his last sentence here. It says, I suggest that as a minimum, staff housing be allowed on any ag parcel and its 10-acre minimum lot size. So that is consistent with this ag, because it's a 10-acre minimum lot size. So if we just deleted that and then handle anything more specific in your zoning documents.
Is that, in my mind, we're saying staff housing is allowed in ag, and the minimum lot size for that is 10 acres, but there's no reason in the zoning ordinance itself, we can't put more restrictive language in there and say, the lot size is, if the lot size is this small, or if you want this much staff housing, then you need more area. I mean, is that?
We could do that.
That's kind of where I'm at is, I just didn't see any other locations where in any of the, it's making a restriction in the language.
Okay. So take out minimum 40-acre lot size after staff housing in the
Yes.
comp plan.
And then I think the definition of that needs to be clarified in the zoning ordinance. So that takes care of 16.
Right, so commercial and highway service.
Remember, these aren't exhaustive uses.
Say again?
These aren't exhaustive uses
Right.
that are in here. These are just kind of a guideline. And we allow caretakers residences right now in highway service and general ag.
So comment 18 by Mark, is he, I don't know Mark Rudeforth, but do you know if he has businesses out in the Black Hills, tourist type businesses?
He does. He has campground.
Yeah, okay, because his comment 18 is that there should be an allowed use for staff housing in the commercial and highway service zoning districts. Yep, the response is that it would be further defined in zoning update.
I think it does already, but I could be wrong.
So is his comment is just because it's not listed in this document. But Matrix response was that it's already listed as an option in general commercial and highway service in our current zoning.
Right,
So as long as it stays within those, then we're addressing his concern.
yeah.
It's just not listed in the document. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, I think that's right, but on-site managers and caretakers, is that the same as staff housing? Or staff housing, I guess, incorporated in that?
Well, it would be, like Richard said, it would depend on how we define it.
Right, exactly, right. So, I mean, I think, but that's something, what you're saying is that's something down the way for the zoning ordinance to deal with.
It is.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
But it's important to know now, because if you want to maintain that in those zoning districts, we've got to carry that forward.
That's right.
Any other inputs or thoughts? We're still kind of perusing through.
Yeah, I'm just reading through the comments and cross-checking in the document. It looks like they are planning to adopt Mr. Bussy's comments in 20 and 21. Or they've at least answered them.
That's what I see. That's what I read. '22, they corrected. Well, looks like they're going to adopt it. The fix. So it looks like the next big discussion is LUH 5.
You know, this is one of those areas where, you know, I don't really know. I mean, I'm certainly not opposed to building codes, so that's not the crux of my question here, but I guess I'm not really familiar with what it all entails. And I just want to make sure that we're not getting into a situation that it's just the cost of it and the practicality of it and so on. I guess I feel, and considering we're starting from zero, it almost seems like this is one where I'd feel more comfortable if it said, rather than the county should establish, the county should, begin the process or explore or something a little bit more.
Being realistic. That's
Steps.
the wrong word to
Steps and
use,
so on.
shall.
But I don't really know too much about this actually, but I just think it's kind of a big step. And, should it be a little bit more of a launch it?
Now, is there other counties? I was in one other place that has inspectors, but they contract out. Have you seen that, PJ? I mean, as far as you adopt the codes and so forth, and I think you guys are kind of talking, it's a big process, which I believe there is, but there's other counties doing it that have contracted out or work with cities.
I've heard about that too. I know that the local ones, Meade County has on staff, and so does Lawrence County. But I haven't heard that much of the pros or cons of contracting it out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always the option of a contractor being swayed from a certain developer.
That was
That
one.
we see a lot already, so maybe keeping it in-house. And we've talked about building codes before and building inspectors, and I would agree, going from 0 to 100 is not the way to go.
Yeah.
Is establish the program, get those people in here, but with an idea of, okay, phase it in over the course of a few years. We're going to do 1 through 5 the first few years, because we get a lot of complaints from people moving in from out of state about the quality of the houses that are being built, houses being built without foundations, driveways pulling away from homes. I mean, we had planning commissioners actually present in front of the Board of Commissioners 5 years ago about their own home and how it was built and how footings only went down for a deck. It was Karen, where it was like 7 inches of concrete and that was it into the ground, and it was already fading away or eroding away. Staff definitely sees a need for building inspectors and of some type in the county, and the public is asking for it.
Right.
And staff will be, whether it's in here or not, staff will be proposing hiring a building inspector with a new budget cycle.
Well, I noticed that on chapter 11, it's listed as a midterm plan, so it's not a short term, it's a midterm. And I'm not at all speaking in opposition of including this in here. I'm just thinking that maybe we should be a little bit more descriptive about knowing that it is a process and so on. And the other thing I've learned in talking to different people is that some counties you inspect this list of things. Some counties have this list of things. And so there's just a lot of variables in terms of how this is implemented. So, I mean, maybe on 5-1 should establish a program or, for comprehensive building codes, or, just something to hedge it a little bit.
Any further input on that section? LU5, LUH5?
Yeah, I do. On 3, these mobile homes or modular homes, I really don't know what international residential codes requirements are. But I guess I just want to make sure that, in these, out in the hinterlands, relying upon mobile and modular homes when you don't have builders close by becomes, ever more important, because it costs a lot for builders to drive into your work site every day. And so I don't know what these codes are, but I would hate to
Yeah, I
make
don't-
this,
A lot of it is for fire safety, and they go back to 1976.
okay, so it's not the kind that's going to cause you not to be able to get financing or any of those kinds of things.
No, it actually helps us, because one of the things staff is looking to do, we, pretty much every jurisdiction around us has a cutoff to allow certain year mobile homes.
Yeah,
They all come to the county. I mean, we permitted mobile homes from the 60s. But what we'd like to do is actually make it a little bit more restrictive and say, okay, maybe 76 is the cutoff, or maybe that's still too old. Maybe in the 80s, it might be the way to go. But from what we can tell, 76 was the start of the requirements that you can objectively look at. And then also, I think it was somewhere in the 80s, 83 or 85 was another major step forward in the construction of modular homes and mobile homes.
okay.
But we are taking in the stuff that other places will not, because we don't have a year restriction.
So does this sentence, does that accomplish what you're trying to accomplish?
That's the start of it, and the zoning ordinance can make it stricter.
I see, okay,
Again, this is general.
yeah, all right.
But did we cover, I'm sorry, it's okay. Commissioner Johnson, did we cover the building code part that you wanted? I know you had mentioned it, but I didn't hear it.
Well, I don't know, I don't think there was any real consensus, but, I guess my 2 cents would be, rather than just establish a comprehensive building code, I'd prefer it be something like would establish, a program for comprehensive building codes, or, something like that.
Mr. Chair.
Establish a plan, maybe?
That'd be all right.
Would the intent be to just adopt the IBC?
Well,
Or,
IBC doesn't cover single-family homes, believe it or not. We'd have to adopt IBC for commercial and also IRC for residential.
I think I think Mark's concern would be, what does this mean? Does this, so you're hiring one guy and he's gonna go around and inspect all of the buildings and all of the homes being built in the county?
Well, that'd be something that we have to discuss. Are they only looking at maybe all the single-family residences and the commercial properties, which actually make up the smallest amount of the permits that we get? But
And the largest,
for inspections could take 4, 5, 6 visits per site. I know Meade County, I believe, does 3 minimum. So that's a lot of traveling for one person, even though if it's a small
So
number.
Meade County has adopted this and has building inspectors.
They do, they actually carry badges and write citations, but they don't have zoning. Their planners actually do the inspecting.
Of course, I don't know, quite frankly, what the fault would be if we just left it the way it was. We adopt it and implement it. It doesn't get adopted and implemented. We can always look back and say, well, that's one thing, that was a goal, we'd like to do that, but we didn't get it done, so later on, next time around, this makes a clear commitment to the idea that building inspection has some virtue, And, but,
Well, there's also building code requirements and then building inspection. So
yeah.
I don't know why you would want one without the other,
Yeah, no, and
really.
No,
but
but, you know,
I'm just, not that you said that, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
We don't want to just do a list of you will build to this, but then no one's really,
but
Following
this
up on
doesn't
it.
say anything. It says implement its use in new construction, which implies inspectors, right?
yeah, the county traditionally has put it on the contractors to do that. Another part of this is also we'd like to do contractors' licenses. As if you've had a lot of contractors before you recently, and with licenses, I think that could help staff out so it doesn't get to that level.
do the counties, do they, the ones you're familiar with, do they charge the homeowner or the builder really and pass on to the homeowner for those inspections?
I'm not sure how it works. I can find out for you.
Yeah.
When this originally came up, probably 6 years ago with the old director, when I was an assistant director, they were looking at possibly just looking at placement of the home, because a lot of setback variances were coming up after the fact. Someone says they'll build it in a certain spot, they don't, they come in, ask for forgiveness, got their money back. So what the director was charged with was looking at, is there a way to maybe do an inspection on site prior to the foundation being poured, because then you have all the stakes in the ground. But then the cost, who's going to cover the cost of it? Are you going to raise taxes? Well, probably not. Is it going to go to the landowner? Is it going to go to the developer? Then also the question of how can you guarantee the stakes are where they're supposed to be when you go out there to inspect that and take a photo? So there were too many holes that were shot into it, and it never went anywhere.
But if you're looking just for a staff member to go out to verify placement at the moment they pour let's just say it's after they pour the foundation. I mean, that's a lot less expensive than having a whole entire building inspector.
Well, that's assuming building inspector's a surveyor that can find out where the lot lines are.
That's right.
That's where it comes up, it's the cost for a surveyor.
Yeah. You know, I guess the reason that I think that and I don't disagree that we could leave it just the way it is and it'd be fine, really, but things that have a lot of implications, cost implications, other implications, I think it's, to me, we're setting ourselves up for, let's say, somebody that comes in and really wants this to happen and wants it to happen big and wants it to happen now. They're just going to use this to say, well, you said you were going to do this. Get with it. Do whatever you need to do. And as opposed to what we're talking about here is kind of a thoughtful process where we consider, where all those other factors are considered, and ultimately we get to, a better place than we are now. And so that's why I guess I'm a little bit more of the idea that the words should somehow reflect the real intent.
So the county should establish an approach to develop comprehensive building codes?
Or to adopt, maybe, or I like the word PJ used. He said a program. He said, we're going to start a program. I thought that was, kind of good. But we also have to use the same kind of thing, because inspection is a companion piece, and so we have to make sure those kind of read the same. And I don't really think we need to, overthink this really, but just, hedge it a little bit. And,
So maybe Matrix can come up with some language on page 311, and then also on chapter 1111-2 is where it also appears.
yes, but that's midterm, and that probably, I guess I'm comfortable with that.
And midterm was 4 to 7 years after adoption.
Yeah, so I'm comfortable with that.
Be okay if we got it done earlier than that?
Well, of course. But it doesn't mean that we're going to run out and
I know.
adopt everything tomorrow, kind of
Correct.
thing. Considering how long this plan is taking, I don't know. 4 years is kind of like tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. This was discussed when I was first hired.
Yes, fair enough.
All right, any further comments? It looks like number 6 was addressed, LUH6, item number 24.
Well, this is, where is that? Where is that?
I think he has a map of that, doesn't he? Talking about billboards,
Yeah.
the scenic byways?
Daniel Weber's, item number 24.
Yeah, I'm looking, there was, one of the fold-out maps that Matrix provided showed some of those scenic corridors. I'm just trying to,
What's the goal?
establish little, better regulation on signs and billboards around the county to keep the,
That's what it
create
says.
scenic byways and to create, and keep them that way for tourists,
Oh, yeah.
so.
Yeah, I don't see that map. I'm
Trying
not
to
really
find where
sure
he did that.
what that is about here.
And that was strictly something that came up from Rick, from him driving around the
Oh.
county. And we know that, that there was an effort made before to try and establish some scenic roadways, but I don't think, I'm not sure that came to full
It didn't go
realization.
anywhere,
I
did
think there was
it?
a lot of opposition over it. But again, these are the comprehensive plan is the goal that the county is trying to achieve, and the zoning ordinance, the flood ordinance, subregs are the way to get there.
Well, they suggest making the change.
Oh, here we go. It's in chapter 6 are the fold-outs for the scenic stuff. And it breaks it down in the different areas of the county as well. So on the screen here, they're showing the western Pennington County. Not so much in central, except for those are entryways into the, forget, is that what they're calling them, entryways into the city? So they have regulations on the corridors that lead into the city because they want a certain look. And then also more eastern side of the state that goes through a lot of public land and also through scenic. But again, that's number 24 on the matrix comments, so we jumped from chapter 3 to chapter 6.
Oh, it's not LUH6.
Not LUH6.
Q6. Am I on item 24?
Mm-hmm.
Is that LUH6?
It's Q6 based on page 11 too, I think, is what I understand.
You're probably right. Because chapter 6 are TCs. I jumped, you didn't.
Oh, I bet you're right. Yeah, you're right.
That's how I interpreted it anyway.
And they want kind of specific reference to some of these, whatever these are. With some limitations, they think the change should be made. Here.
Any further discussion on this? Or any other thoughts, comments, concerns?
With regards to goal LUH-8, there's a lot of shalls and to encourage the use of solar energy, solar hot water panels, and then below the wind and alternative energy sources. Do we want to use the word shall or should that be should?
Well, if we use the word shall, it means that we write ordinances that encourage it. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to do it, depending on how we write it. Yeah, remember, this is the guiding direction for the other document that actually has the rules.
Right, but I think, where's Michelle when you need her? That shall term, and it's been argued so many times, shall and will and whatnot in the state legislature. I don't know if I'm comfortable putting one or the other without it being very clear that that word means
Well,
that it
Will.
is possible versus you absolutely have to.
but this is there are definitions up here in this document, if I can find it. Okay, so on the bottom of page 1-6, it says, for the purposes of implementation of this comprehensive plan, each policy includes the term shall, which provides specific and certain guidance for development, or should, which signifies a less rigid directive. And so that's the definitions, the meanings here. And, I mean, I kind of agree. I think we need to use shall pretty
Sparingly.
sparingly, exactly.
Yep, I think
And,
those should be shoulds.
and so I'm perfectly
Yeah.
okay.
It's not that the goals aren't desirable, it's just that they're gonna be received in a, less charitable way, I think, because it does imply sort of, if you're gonna do this,
Correct.
or should, at least says, plus a desirable social, economic goal, whatever, so it would seem that those two terms are pretty
It's the same consistency.
Yeah.
distinctly different.
Yeah. I'm more comfortable with should because shall indicates that
Yeah.
you have to do it.
But what that have to would be regulated through the zoning ordinance of what that actually looks like.
Right. But again, it's still you have to encourage the use of solar energy.
So this is Pennington County for the next 20 years.
Right.
So what is,
But
like I said.
but I guess the other little hiccup I have on these things is that I fuss a little bit, is that it's not clear to me what can really be done. I mean, what could really be in the zoning ordinance that would encourage, okay, so it provides specific and certain guidance for development. That's what the definition said. So it's in the zoning ordinance. But what could be done really to encourage solar energy and da 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 da? I mean, help me out here. What could be done? Because usually it's a cost thing, when
Over time.
Yeah, that's right. But we're not getting involved in that in people's budgets. And so what could be done?
So maybe we could do a discount on a building permit. I don't know. There could be some type of energy efficient ward system. I don't know what that would look like.
But they could also could mandate that if you have a certain size home that you have to have,
X number, and a lot of states have that.
that you have to do this, you have to do that, which could include, you have to have the solar panel, water, heaters, you have to have other energy conservation systems in there. You may have to have, and some of those things cost a lot of money. And,
Oh, yeah.
and if you're already living far eastern side of Pennington County, you know what I mean? And now you're really increasing the cost of your building project.
And I don't have any of that at my house. Is there a difference in how it's assessed?
For
Having energy efficient items there? Solar panels, windmill, I mean, is that maybe
what do you
one of
mean
the
assessed?
benefits?
So
No.
The tax rolls, assessed value?
Does it make it more valuable?
the only thing it does for me right now is my insurance has gone up a little bit because got to cover it on my insurance. But outside of that, I haven't seen. I guess where it becomes valuable or not is if if I put my farm up for sale and Jim comes out there and goes, "Ooh, you've got solar panels. That's
it's
what I want."
attractive to that
Then
buyer.
boom, I like it. But if Kathy comes on there and like, "I don't need solar panels. I don't care," then it doesn't really matter.
Sure. Okay.
So it's a wash one way or the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do get a discount from Western River Electric for being all electric, or if you got
Well,
geothermal. Suppo-
During the summer, I obviously produce more solar use than I do in the winter. And whenever I overproduce, they buy back at wholesale rate. But I think that's starting to go away. That's not guaranteed for anybody moving forward because I think they're getting too many. And I'm not saying that this is like, this is what they're doing, but I think that they're getting enough of these systems in there that it's getting to the point where it's not beneficial one way or the other. Before it was great because it helped offset, but now it's not really.
I was talking heat pumps type thing.
Oh, yeah. I can tell you this, whenever I put my solar system in, because it's connected to my house and because of the way it was installed, I lost my heat meter. So I don't get discounted heat. Because of the way it comes into the house, because it reads going into the house, how much is going in, and then, the heat meter, the way it came across, they couldn't do it with mine. So I either had to have the solar or I had to lose the heat meter. So it could be a negative aspect too, depending on where they're at and how their electrical was originally built into their home.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Marsh, so for goal LUH-8, we're looking to change the shalls to should on those 3 instances?
Yeah, my
agree.
recommendation would be 8.1 and 8.3 would be change the word shall to should.
What about 8.4 then?
That as well.
Yep.
What's the advantage to having solar energy relative to the way in which properties are situated? What is the advantage? I mean, they imply an advantage here, and I'm thinking, well, what is the advantage? I mean,
Well,
Cost.
what's an advantage to having solar?
yeah.
So if all your power goes out due to a storm, if I shut off my main power breaker back to the power company, at least during the day, my system produces, again, depending on how much sun, I actually can have energy in my home when other people have to use gas generators, propane generators. So now they're incurring extra
No,
costs
but
of
we're
fuel.
really talking about the distribution of property types, et cetera, and the location of types of property. I don't understand how that promotes
Tracking.
the goals. You see what I mean? I mean, I understand what the virtues are of solar energy,
But you're wondering
but
why
I'm
it's in
just wondering why it's there. I mean, I think it's a great goal. Both my sons have solar homes, and they think it's just grand, but it's just, I don't quite understand why they put it in there.
I'll go back and look, because these all originate from public meetings. So I'll look back and see if I can find out where this came from,
Oh, okay.
and maybe even who it came from.
You mean, in other words, public meetings here?
Throughout the county, yeah, the 15 that we
Okay,
held over
okay.
18
So
months.
somebody obviously, and they put it in there, and I guess my question is just, so what's the imperative here for, planning of, property types, et cetera?
It'd be nice to have Sonny here, actually.
Yeah.
'Cause he could
Yeah.
speak
yeah.
intelligently about all this, 'cause he owns a solar company.
I mean, I can only tell you my experience as a consumer. That has a business, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah. Yep.
Any other comments, notations? If not, I would entertain a motion. I believe item number 25 is already addressed in there with a response for correction. And I think that's the last item.
Okay.
Is that a good, clean stopping point?
It is a good, clean stopping point if we have a motion to solidify what we've done.
I'll make a motion to approve the noted changes as discussed in chapter 3.
Motion.
Second that.
Motion and second. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. We met our goal of 3 chapters so far. Thank y'all very much on that one. Woo-hoo. All right, item number 20.
To continue this item to the next meeting.
We still need a motion to continue the
They're all
reviews.
being and they're all being noticed in the papers.
Okay,
So that means it's on the agenda then for the next meeting. is that
Next 2 meetings.
Next 2 meetings.
Yeah, you had mentioned it before.
Right.
But now that you've taken action and haven't covered the entire document in this meeting, officially move it to the next one, because they are as needed.
So we need to continue the review of the comprehensive plan to the next meeting. Do we need to set a further meeting in
You
that?
have 2 other ones already scheduled.
So next
if
meeting, we
needed.
would at least have to probably consider.
See how far you get on the next meeting.
Okay,
But I would reword your motion. Sorry, let me find that, because I think.
Give
you
us a
had said- I think you
recommendation.
had said review.
Good.
But I would follow the same language as to consider amendment / adoption of the comprehensive plan, just to be consistent. That's what the amendment was, that's what the agenda item was today.
So give us the wording for that motion to continue.
And to continue ordinance amendment 1901 to consider the amendment and adoption of the Pennington County Comprehensive Plan to the next planning commission meeting.
Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you, that was a great discussion.
Item 21, yes, it was. Thank you.
Item 21, County Board Report. The Board of Commissioners concurred with the Planning Commission's recommendation from the February 11th, 2019 meeting. The second reading of Rezone 1812 and Comprehensive Plan Amendment 1811 for Borgelum Historical Center Incorporated, Dwayne Pencratz as the owner, Ken Nash as the agent, was continued to the March 5th Board of Commissioners meeting. There's a commissioner trying to help the parties involved come to some type of agreement.
All right, items from the public. I don't see anyone in the public. Do you want to, next item is items from the staff.
Yes, there is one item. There's a
Of
memo
course,
in front of
there's
you.
always an
Sorry.
item.
It is actually a training coming up in Pier on March 13th. The training is 3 hours from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. There's no cost for the training. I'll be attending. I believe also 2 Board of Commissioners will be attending and also staff from the Commissioner's office, primarily because of the topics, validity of county zoning regulations, how to run an effective Board of Adjustment meeting, which is more for the board, conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, and planners roundtable, which to discuss CAFOs and wind towers. So this is open to all elected and appointed officials and people like that. So staff, I plan on driving up there in the afternoon and coming back that night. So if anybody is looking to go, they can share.
When is that?
Wednesday, March 13th. It's in Pier at the Ramcota from 2 to 5. So probably get there around 1.
Who's going from the Board of Commissioners?
I'm not exactly sure. I just know 2 are going. Oh, possibly Ron Ross Connect and Gary Drews, if my memory serves.
Ron and Gary.
Okay. Originally, this was sent out and it would only covered CAFOs, the calving or operations, but this updated email from February 20th definitely added some more depth to the meeting, so it seemed valuable to go to.
Well, give me a couple of days. I'll let you know if I can go. Is anybody else? Would you be interested in carpooling? If you're driving out there?
I suppose we could. Yeah, we can fit 3 more in the Jeep. Yeah, it wouldn't be a problem. So we'd look up, probably leaving about 10 in the morning. We probably wouldn't get back till, how many hours is maybe 8 at night, maybe?
Would you pick me up in New Underwood on the side of the road and drop me off?
I'd have to check to see if I'm allowed to.
It's on your way. Goodness gracious.
There's a lot of policies being written in the county right now. I want to make sure that we don't violate any.
Let me know if you can. If you can, then
I don't think it'd be a problem.
I may be able to finagle that one where I come that day.
But we have to RSVP by March 5th, so if anybody from the Planning Commission could let Jerry or I know by March 4th. And we'll also send this out an email so that Sandy and Sunny have it. That's all.
Whoo, you're gonna, did we already meet? Yeah, we did meet the young.
Go on up.
Oh, he hasn't been introduced. No? All right.
So this is Jason Fennison. Wham, got it right. He's our new planner too. He was hired probably about 6 weeks ago, but had to retire from the military first to come out here. So we're very happy to have him, but I'll let him say the rest.
So yeah, Jason Fennison, just recently retired from the Air Force after 24 and a half years-ish. And born and raised here in Rapid City, so had an interest in coming back here and affecting the future of it. And that's why I applied for the job.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome, welcome.
Where was you stationed at? Kind of got an accent.
I was all over the place, but most recently out of Minot.
Yeah, that southern Minot accent, you pick it right up.
All right, well, thank you. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
And it's very important that he's here because that is the 9th employee in our office. We've been at 8 for years. And so the Board of Commissioners allowed us to hire one additional by rerouting some of the building permit fees that we got and giving less to the drainage fund, or giving a set amount to the highway department and the drainage fund, and the rest went to staff, but also to be able to kind of help with future projects for us for new software. So, thank you. Lloyd?
All right, item 24, items from the membership. Anybody have anything?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I might be gone at the next meeting, but I will advise the board accordingly.
Next meeting is, we're fixing to be into March already. Ugh,
March 11, and I will be gone.
What's the next meeting?
March 11th.
I'm not gonna be here.
That's 3.
That's 3,
So we might have to,
possibly 3.
so we'll have to check with the other 2 that aren't here and might possibly pull another board
Cold out
member in.
Have you noticed it's cold around here?
It is?
People flee to other warmer climates temporarily.
That's March. It's like fixing to start getting warm again. It's gonna be like 12.
I'll be here in April.
Mark.
When's that coming?
Next week.
I know, when's the heat coming? Somebody turn
10
on the heater.
minutes.
It'll be 20s next week. We're good.
It'll be 30 by Thursday or so this week, so.
Yeah, so find out, if we don't have a quorum at all, you're gonna bring in extra county commissioners?
When we get that low, we'll usually request an extra board member. But only one more, we can't have 3.
Well, okay,
Well, that'd be a board meeting.
that's true. All right, any other items from the membership? All right, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.